This is Ramak Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of What If Kid Madara accidentally travels to the future and befriended Naruto. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
You are dismissed. The masked shinobi said, "Hi," and then he disappeared. As he read the reports that were spread out on his desk, Danzo scowled. His root spies collected the information, and based on how the reports appeared to line up, they could be regarded as trustworthy. They claimed that the clan had adopted a Uchiha bastard named Madara, and to add to the suspicions, the clan hardly ever adopted illegitimate children from its members. The clan head himself had chosen to adopt the boy. Every sane person should have realized something was wrong. Reasonable was not one of the many qualities that made Hiruzen what it was. With only the barest knowledge of the boy's background, that stupid man had actually permitted the boy to become a village citizen and, as a result, to join the village's military as a leaf nin. And for the sole reason that Hiruzen reportedly didn't want to further enrage the Uchiha clan. Danzo hardly fought the impulse to shake his head in shock. Regardless of how politely the village treated them, did Hiruzen not know that clan would strike? Since the village's founding, the seeds for rebellion have been planted. Didn't his sensei, the second, teach that man anything? He pondered as he picked up another piece of paper that detailed multiple interactions between the Kyuubi boy and the Uchiha. Since his ninja were skilled in the art of silent killing, which leaves no evidence behind, it would be very easy to kill the boy. Yes, the Uchiha clan would undoubtedly grow suspicious, but what could they do in the absence of evidence? Every rational person could see who would prevail in a conflict between the village and the clan if Danzo didn't speed up the inevitable. He would benefit more if the clan attacked much sooner as a result of that provocation. He had absolutely no plans to engage in amicable negotiations with the clan until they were powerful enough to pull off a coup and seize control of the village, unlike Hiruzen. Even Hiruzen wouldn't be idle once they began attacking the village, and they would be able to eliminate the threat that had been present for far too long. Although the clan did produce strong and occasionally devoted shinobi, the eldest son of the clan head was a prime example. It was preferable to simply destroy them all given the threat they posed. In any case, he had been far too forgiving in this area for far too long. But there was one thing that prevented him from ordering the murder. In any case, why had the clan chief adopted the boy? Even though Fugaku must have known that doing so would raise suspicions, he still went ahead and did it. Something unique and valuable about that boy must have been the driving force behind clan taking that chance. However, what? Or did he just interpret it too strongly? That boy might also have been Fugaku's child, but the head of the Uchiha clan didn't seem like that kind of guy. He could, of course, choose to overlook the boy's clan membership, and he typically would. He was unaware that Naruto was the same factor that had caused Hiruzen to second guess his choice. Or rather, the connection between Madara and the Kyuubi container. It was for completely different reasons, of course. The Uzumaki boy had always been a target for Danzo's village weaponry. However, his plans for the boy had never materialized because of Hiruzen, who insisted on letting him have a typical childhood and all that. Hiruzen remained obstinate on that subject, despite the fact that the other villages made full use of their Jinchuriki. Hiruzen, one of the Anbu spies who was ordered to watch the boy, also made sure that he would not contact the boy directly or through one of his root ninja. He had carefully avoided the boy, knowing that if Danzo persisted in trying, he would cross the last line. He had learned about the boy from his spies in the regular Anbu troops. He could control the Jinchuriki through the boy if he were to become close to that Uchiha boy, who was currently one of the closest people to the Jinchuriki. This was not a difficult task in and of itself, as most people did not want to even be on good terms with the boy. At the latest, when the Uchiha had attained the rank of Chunin and the clan would insist on ending the watching because the boy would then be a true ninja of the village and have already proven his loyalty, Danzo doubted that Hiruzen would devote even more of his resources to keeping an eye on the boy. Hiruzen would eventually give in because he wanted to settle disputes as amicably as possible. Danzo would take advantage of that fatal weakness this time. He had always taken pride in his ability to be subtle and effective, but he would need to be careful not to alert Hiruzen and the boy's Anbu guard. But with whom should he approach the Uchiha gradually? In addition to the fact that it would be premature to confront him directly, if the clan learned of it, their alarm bells would go off right away. No, he would use a kid who was about the boy's age as one of his agents. He allowed his eyes to wander over the papers, mentally searching for the right ninja in a categorical manner. When he at last discovered the ideal applicant for this position, his eyes widened a little. A 13-year-old boy who was described as being kind and absent-minded but also bold and impatient, despite the Roots policy to abandon their feelings. Who would have guessed that one of his ninja, with their emotions intact, would be useful to him? Danzo let a tiny smile slip onto his lips. For this mission, he had found the right man, or boy. Hio! He exclaimed. The root leader was immediately confronted by a man in a mask with dark, spiky hair. Hio was about to inquire about his leader's demands when Danzo said, "I want to have a talk with Shin. Bring him to me." The man in the mask bowed his head. "Yes, Danzo. Sama." Then he was gone in an instant. Hashirama glanced behind him. Nothing. He gave a headshake. He had probably just been having hallucinations. With a frown, he turned back to the river and squatted down to retrieve a pebble from the floor. His eyes narrowed a little as he lifted and tossed the pebble across, watching it bounce off the water's surface, making ripples along the way, and then thumping softly on the other side. His mood plummeted even more at the sight of nostalgia, and he let out a deep sigh before lowering himself to the ground and cradling his legs to his chest. Madara had disappeared a month earlier. He had been requesting confirmation from Tobirama that he had actually visited the river that day and that it wasn't just a weird dream. However, this optimism was swiftly dashed when a displeased Tobirama informed him that, yes, he had left to undertake whatever task he had been working on and that he shouldn't bother him while he was training. His lips curled into a warm smile in spite of himself. He still had his younger brother, at least. Even after it was established that Hashirama hadn't been merely dreaming, he was still unable to comprehend why Madara had abruptly vanished, despite his best efforts. He had suspicions, of course, but each one was more ridiculous than the last. The ones in which Madara had been kidnapped by an enemy clan were the ones that, thus far, made even the slightest sense. Even though he was widely commended for his exceptional skills, Madara was still far from powerful, so it was very likely that he had been taken from him without his knowledge. Hashirama had no idea how such a thing could possibly be possible. However, he couldn't completely rule out the possibility because there were so many clans that only had kami. Sama knows how many secret jutsu up their sleeve. In that instance, it would be simple to explain why Hashirama had escaped unharmed. The people who are accused of kidnapping Madara might be Senju allies, which would make them enemies of the Uchiha clan. This would make it very likely that they would do this. He had shivered when he had first arrived at that conclusion because it would have implied that the clan was aware of his activities outside the clan compound. Even though he knew who he really was, his father, the clan leader, would have undoubtedly wanted to speak with him and then severely punished him for interacting with a clan enemy. Since that had not happened, it would imply that either his father was unaware of it or that he had chosen not to inform Hashirama of his son's betrayal. Most likely because if Hashirama had been informed beforehand, he would not have had an opportunity to attack Madara. Hashirama would not have stood idly if he had been under surveillance, and his father would have undoubtedly been told that they were close friends. If that were the case, Hashirama couldn't help but respect his father's self-control for being able to pretend that nothing was wrong around him, since he must have been a traitor by now in his father's eyes. However, it wouldn't explain why, despite the successful abduction, his father hasn't taken any action. He could hardly believe it, but it's possible that his father chose to pardon him by pretending that Hashirama had been a spy all along, trying to gather intelligence on the enemy. It would also clarify why he had not been informed of it, preventing him from making a big deal out of it and revealing to those who were aware of the kidnapping that he had not been a spy at all. After this specific revelation, he could only speculate about what might happen. It wouldn't be pretty, either. After all of this, Hashirama made the decision to become even more involved in clan affairs in order to demonstrate his continued loyalty as a clan member and to gain insight into the clan's plans, both past and present, but particularly the past. After coming up with that plan, he went to his father a few days later and asked him to tell him more about the enemies of their clan, never even mentioning the Uchiha. His father was initially taken aback, but he was more than willing to comply after learning that Hashirama had finally come to terms with the fact that he had to assume his role as the current clan heir. It seems that his father had decided that Hashirama could finally be shaped into the ideal clan leader his father had always desired, since there were no longer any attractions in the form of the sons of the enemy clan leader. His brother had been more dubious of his sudden interest in clan matters, but he didn't gripe because Hashirama was, for once, taking things seriously. Overall, his plan had been successful thus far, but it was moving at an excruciatingly slow pace. Since Madara had been abducted, only Kami Sama knew what had happened to him, and the longer it went, the more probable it was that he had died. Even though Hashirama was an optimist, he didn't even entertain the idea that Madara might be held alive as a hostage or as a negotiating chip because an enemy who had exposed all of his information was worthless. The Uchiha clan was the type that, if it meant that the clan as a whole would not suffer, could afford to lose one of its members, even if that member was the clan heir. The idea that the Uchiha would prefer to kill him than give the enemy access to their Kekkei Genkai or any other private information about their clan wasn't even that crazy. However, his clan was most likely no better. He felt sick to his stomach at that thought. It had simply been too much, and he didn't feel any better knowing that he might be held accountable because he had insisted on maintaining their friendship and getting together. With figurative dark clouds looming over his head, he sighed again. Even though he was in a pitiful state, he didn't miss the sound that usually accompanies the throwing of a shuriken or kunai, so he leapt to the left and watched as the kunai embedded the spot where he had been only a moment before. When he saw what was affixed to the kunai's hilts, explosion tags, his eyes grew even wider. This time, as he poured chakra into his legs to jump away, he just managed to escape the explosion's range. Hashirama instinctively closed his eyes as he fell to the ground, safely out of harm's way, placing his hands over his head to prevent himself from being struck by flying objects caused by the explosion, and the ground shook as the destructive power of the tags was released. He jumped back up and assumed his customary fighting stance as soon as the smoke had subsided. Sweat was streaming down his face, and every muscle in his body was tense. That wasn't good. He had left all of his weapons at the clan compound and was not wearing any armor to protect him. He cursed his negligence in that regard for the first time. "Show yourself," he exclaimed. It was worth a try, even though he didn't think his enemy would show up and lose his advantage. Incredibly, someone did come out of the forest. He caught a glimpse of the person approaching and almost let out a gasp. "No way. Our daughter you, Izuna?" Madara had only mentioned his brother a few times, mainly to express his determination to protect his lone surviving sibling and to explain that Hashirama only knew his name because of Madara's transgression. Therefore, the resemblance in appearance couldn't be a coincidence, even though he knew very little about Madara's younger brother. As Izuna narrowed his crimson-red eyes, "Did he have the Sharingan?" he hissed. "How do you know that?" His grip on his kunai tightened until his knuckles turned white, suggesting that his assumption had been accurate. Hashirama calmly replied, "Madara told me," but a bubble of excitement was slowly beginning to form in the pit of his stomach. Madara's brother must have some idea of where he was at the moment. The final word was spit out as if it were an insult, which it most likely was for Uchiha. Why would he tell an outsider like you? A senju? Hashirama's enthusiasm subsided. He had a feeling that this would not be a simple conversation. He let out a sigh. He started by absently scratching the back of his head and said, "Look, it's a long story. In summary, we met here one day without knowing who we were, and we talked, trained, had fun, and eventually became friends. Then..." Izuna interrupted, pointing his kunai angrily. "Then you found out about Ni-san's identity and betrayed him," he said. "No," cried Hashirama loudly. "After some convincing and excellent Kami-sama, Madara did. Didn't that sound like some strange romance Mito-chan would occasionally make him listen to? I never sell out my friends. We both found out each other's identities, but we still managed just fine." Izuna frowned at the boy in front of him, who was flushed for no apparent reason. "You really want me to believe that?" "I know that it's hard to believe, but you've got to trust me on that." He snorted incredulously at this. "A senju? Surely, you jest." "Madara trusted me," noted Hashirama. The dark-haired boy said sourly, "And look where that got him," his face darkening even more, when his lips suddenly formed a knife. Sharp smile. "But thanks to you, I've awakened my Sharingan. The bloodline for my brother, huh?" Despite Madara's frequent pleas to the contrary, Hashirama wasn't stupid, even though he wasn't as quick to pick things up as his younger brother. Even so, he found it difficult to understand what Izuna was attempting to say, and something else was also troubling him. Hashirama demanded to know, "What are you trying to say, and how do you know that I'm a senju?" "I've been trying to find out a bit more of what had happened to my brother. My father along with the rest of my clan have already abandoned him, deeming him a worthless fool if he couldn't even take care of himself." The youngster nearly choked out. Hearing his own father dismiss his child in such a manner was infuriating, regardless of one's level of battle hardness. Call him a pessimistic fool, but Hashirama was positive that their father would permit them to care for their children and mourn their passing if it weren't for the difficult circumstances they were in and the obligation they had to care for the entire clan as the heads of their respective clans. Unfortunately, they were dealing with a difficult reality, and he was aware that if he spoke these words to the Uchiha boy, they would only be interpreted as meaningless consolation. He therefore kept quiet and awaited Izuna's next words. By now, the tomos in his red eyes were spinning wildly, seemingly in response to his emotional turmoil. "But I didn't just want to give up. He's my last sibling. Like hell I just abandoned him," he said. He pointed at his red eyes and smiled bitterly, as if he could see what Hashirama had been contemplating. I awakened them when I heard that the search for my brother had been abandoned, when I heard my father's words. Hashirama already understood what it meant to awaken the Uchiha's bloodline, but he was unsure of the exact requirements needed to activate the Sharingan. He swallowed. Look, I'm as clueless as you about this matter, so why won't we team up? I mean, with the two of us on different sides, it might be easier to pick up useful information on Madara's whereabouts. We could, I dunno, arrange meeting where we could share information with each other and make some plans and stuff like that. He hesitated and turned to the other boy's expression. Nothing was revealed. That much sighing, Hashirama was certain, could not be regarded as healthy. At last, when the silence made Hashirama twitchy, Izuna responded, meeting in the same way Madara did. I don't want to disappear like he did, Senju. Even though he felt his patience was waning quickly, people frequently said that he had the patience of a saint. Like I've said before, I've got nothing to do with. To be honest, the only thing I know is that me and Madara had a staring competition. I stopped because it got boring. He yelled at me, then he threw a pebble. It somehow went back and hit him in his face. You had to see his expression. It was really funny. His tone became more glum afterward. He began his story haltingly, looking at nothing on the ground. When I've recovered, Madara was gone and yeah, that's it, he said. He looked up when Izuna's silence continued, and he saw that she was staring at him as if someone had challenged him to a staring contest. Hashirama felt a little uneasy because he didn't even blink once. What? Izuna appeared to awaken from her daze when she heard the question. His red eyes never left Hashirama's face as he blinked slowly. At this point, he was shouting and brandishing his kunai wildly as he stared indecorously at Hashirama, who had begun to laugh nervously and scratch the back of his head. You really want me to believe, he said, danger. Calmly, that Madara.ni.san had a staring competition with you? That he hit himself with a stone and then disappeared? She asked. Reluctantly, he acknowledged, well, if you put it that way, it does sound silly. When Izuna said, I've just repeated what you've said, and if you really think I'm going to believe it then you're even more stupid than you look, he continued. Oi! Yelled Hashirama angrily. Just because you, Uchiha, have no idea of what awesomeness is, it doesn't mean that I have no idea of what it is either. If you really think your haircut is awesome, then you, Senju, not only have inferior eyesight, you lot also lack brains, which now that I think of it isn't all that surprising. Hashirama swiftly returned to the original subject after realizing that he was losing the battle there. Do you really think that I would feed you with such nonsense if my plan was to trick you into trusting me? Or maybe that's exactly what you want me to believe, Izuna shot back. Maybe, maybe not, admitted Hashirama. We could both argue until the whole Uzumaki clan has died out without us making any progress, but I would rather avoid that. I understand that it isn't easy to trust me. Madara didn't trust me either at the beginning. With good reason, mumbled Izuna. Hashirama didn't even attempt to respond to that. You could arrange the time and place and the conditions and whatever else you want of these meetings. I will come alone, with no armor, no weapons, and you could come with your whole gear, if that makes you feel comfortable. I only want us to work together on this matter. You're his brother and I'm his friend. We've got the same goal and two work better than one. It's only logical that we should team up. Besides, with a broad grin on his face, maybe we could become friends too. What do you think, Izuna? The sound of his name almost made the Uchiha wince, but when he answered, he did so passionately, saying, over my dead body. He even crossed his arms, somehow avoiding getting cut by the kunai as he did so. His protruding tongue was the only thing missing. Like his brother Tobirama, Izuna was a little brat despite having the weapons and Sharingan. The thought made him smile even more. Izuna finally said, I will think about it, as she narrowed her eyes suspiciously at Hashirama, whose face appeared to be about to break in two. But I still don't believe you about how Ni.san disappeared, he continued. Hashirama confessed, I barely understand what has happened too, her smile gone. I suspect that it was some kind of secret jutsu from some clan, but without any reliable information, I can't be too sure. Anyway, you still haven't answered my question. How did you know that I was a Senju? Izuna looked down sheepishly, which surprised him. This caused Hashirama to raise his eyebrows. I was searching in the woods for hints about Madara. Then I saw you and decided to observe you. It would indicate that Izuna was on par with or even superior to his younger brother in terms of stealth if he failed to spot the Uchiha. You've been muttering and I've overheard something about the Senju and Madara and I've kind of lost it then, so I attacked, he said. There wasn't much more to say then. Oh, I see. So you actually wanted to talk with me? Well, Izuna started, his rigid frame finally giving way. I wanted to interrogate you and then drag you to the Uchiha clan compound for further interrogation. I mean, there was a big chance that I would succeed since you've got no weapons or armor and I've got my Sharingan. Hashirama cautiously questioned, but you don't actually plan on doing it now, or later, right? He would prefer not to argue with Izuna if at all possible. Izuna gave a shrug. It depends. Hashirama scowled. On what? It depends on whether I'll actually find out more about Madara or just end up being gagged and tortured somewhere with my brother. Hashirama joked, but then you would have found out your brother's whereabouts. He was silenced by a death glare, and even though the boy who gave it was as old as his younger brother, Kami Sama, the Sharingan, could be even more terrifying than he had imagined. With her shoulders slumped forward and her face darkened, Hashirama muttered, I was only trying to lighten up the mood. You obviously failed miserably at that, Izuna observed, raising his eyebrows in response to the pitiful scene in front of him. Are you really a friend of Ni-san? I can't imagine him, well, hanging out with you. What? Hashirama exclaimed angrily, straightening his stance once more. Izuna blinked in surprise, wondering in silence whether the Senju in front of him was bipolar. Additionally, the Uchiha clan was accused of insanity. His smile could only be described as smug. I beat your Ni-san several times. Not as lame as you thought, right? He said. Izuna gaped openly. No way could a lame person with a lame haircut and lame clothes. Hashirama sulked as he fell to the ground, clutching his legs to his chest. No need to tell me how lame everything about me is, he said. Izuna scowled as he said, something like this is exactly the reason why I think you're lame. Izuna disregarded the further decline in Hashirama's mood, saying, and anyway, I don't want to waste my time talking about whether you're lame or not. The answer is obvious anyway. So just answer my question. How can I be sure that it's not some kind of trap of yours? If you can give me a good explanation then we could, he said, averting his gaze. Hashirama began as he began to stand up, can't think of any suitable explanation to give you. I can only repeat what I've said before. Anything about the meetings and this truce, alliance or whatever it is in general, it's all up to you. I'm willing to go along with just about everything, if that means we can find Madara. Izuna asked quietly, his eyes darkening once more. Why? Why go through all of this for him? You barely know him. Why would you do something even his own father wouldn't do? He's my friend, was the straightforward justification. I don't want to leave behind my friends. It's just something I won't allow myself to do. They fell silent after making this declaration, but it didn't feel tense or uncomfortable. Rather, it felt pleasant and tranquil. He let himself fall to the floor once more and gazed up at the sky. Before long, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye, and he looked over to see Izuna settle down next to him. They remained that way for some time until Izuna made the decision to speak up. Izuna subtly proposed, how about we meet on top of that cliff not far from here? He had closed his eyes at one point, most likely to give them a break from the strain of his recently awakened Sharingan. The precipice. Hashirama's heart tightened as he recalled that their dream of establishing a village had begun at that exact location. Besides, it will be easier to spot any enemies from such a high point, Izuna continued, oblivious to Hashirama's abrupt gloom on her face. Hashirama raised one eyebrow and said, you really are paranoid, do you know that? Izuna shrugged and joked, runs in the family, I suppose, wondering absently when he had gotten so comfortable with that Senju boy. Hashirama looked directly at the boy standing next to him. He trailed off, looking expectantly at Izuna, who shrugged once more in response. What led to that sudden change of heart? Not that I mind or anything, he said. I've realized that you don't mean me or my clan any harm as of now, so I'm willing to cooperate with you. Hashirama made every effort to hide his smile at the near fall. However, he could see that, as a shinobi, trust was not something that could be readily granted to anyone. Izuna went on, drawing Hashirama's focus back to their current discussion, and I've remembered something Ni-san told me a while ago. He said that if you want to gain something, you have to be willing to lose something, and if you want to become stronger, you have to take risks. He sounded a little like Otto-san, but I believe what he said was correct, so I'm willing to risk everything to find Ni-san. Izuna, Hashirama could not think of anything to say. Such devotion and loyalty to a single individual rather than a clan was uncommon. Izuna inquired inquisitively, what I've been wondering about though is, well, how do you know that I'm not going to do something? This had been bothering her ever since Hashirama suggested that alliance. It was not long before Hashirama responded. I don't. That's why I told you that I trust you, he replied. Izuna slowly stood up and looked at the sun's height before saying, I see. It's gotten late. We'll meet in 1 week at the cliff. I'm on a mission tomorrow. Hashirama quickly tried to remember if he had any upcoming missions to complete, but he was unable to think of anything. He could only hope that his father wouldn't give him any missions until then, because if he did, Hashirama would have to finish it right away. Okay, it's settled then. Izuna nodded before he began to run away, and even though Hashirama had plans for the future, he couldn't help but think that maybe things weren't as dire as he had initially believed as he watched the Uchiha go. Even though they had not gotten along well at first, he had somehow made friends with another Uchiha, one of whom thought the other was behind his brother's kidnapping. It was evidence that the war could be ended and that the Senju and Uchiha could work together. The thought of such a promising future, one of peace, made Hashirama smile all the way back to the compound, even after his father and brother had questioned him about his activities. Indeed, he may be idealistic and optimistic, but it didn't seem like he had any reason to be in the near future. Naruto had few people to turn to for guidance. There was no way to ask other kids. Despite his reluctance to acknowledge it, he needed an adult's opinion in this situation, and he didn't think the other kids would even be willing to assist him. One hand could count the number of adults who did not hate him. Although there was Gigi, he was constantly very busy and didn't seem to want to be bothered with this type of issue. The Anbu guards were also constantly watching him, but from what he understood, they would only speak if it was absolutely necessary, and he wasn't sure if his issue justified that. Iruka Sensei was also present. He was the only instructor with whom Naruto felt at ease enough to inquire about jutsu and a variety of other ninja-related topics. However, he was still a teacher, and he knew from experience that it was never a good idea to ask teachers questions, particularly if they had nothing to do with school. Even though he wasn't entirely sure if the same could be said about Iruka Sensei, the teachers would always advise the students to be safe rather than sorry. You will fail the mission if you are not careful, etc. Only 2 individuals remained after everyone else left for different reasons. Because of this, Naruto ended up waiting for a bowl of his favorite miso ramen to be brought to him while perched on a stool. Ayame commented, "You seem troubled, Naruto-kun," as she positioned the steaming bowl of ramen in front of the blonde. "Itadakimasu." Naruto clapped his hands together and yelled. He was slurping down the ramen at a startling rate in the blink of an eye. Naruto. He looked up from his bowl, his mouth full, and said, "What? Don't ignore me, Naruto-kun. It's not very nice and don't talk with your mouth full," Ayame said. After he finished the ramen, he scratched the back of his head sheepishly and said, "Sorry." Tucci, who was standing in the kitchen making Naruto more miso ramen, burst out laughing. "Ayame, you're acting as if you're his mother. Give the poor boy a break." Ayame defended herself, her face blushing a little. I didn't mean to patronize him. I just think it's important that he knows such things," she said. Naruto grinned and replied, "I don't mind, setting the chopsticks on top of the bowl. Seconds, please." "Here we go," Tucci said, swapping out the empty bowl for a fresh one that contained Naruto's favorite roasted pork fillet and delectable miso ramen. "But I'm curious myself. I can tell that something is bothering you, Naruto. So tell us. There is no better way to get rid of one's worries than sharing them with other people over some good ramen." The blonde smiled and started explaining his issue to them. He was aware that asking them had been wise. He could definitely get assistance from those who could prepare such delicious food. "I've got a problem." Concerned and not even bothering to work, Ayame asked, "A problem?" Despite his lack of interest, Tucci had focused almost all of his attention on Naruto, demonstrating that his skilled hands could prepare ramen. "I've got a friend," Naruto declared without hesitation. He never minced words. Naruto would typically yell loudly and smile broadly whenever he made such a declaration. The two weren't entirely sure how to react to Naruto saying it so composedly and thoughtfully. Ayame asked cautiously, "Naruto-kun, is that friend of yours one of those kinds?" She and her father had heard enough stories about Naruto's purported friends. Most of the time, they had just been miscommunications, but occasionally, someone would try to approach the boy in order to hurt him. Fortunately, the Anbu had always been able to step in and stop things before they happened. Only the rest of it, however, gave her the murderous impulse to stab everyone in the face who might still believe Naruto was a demon despite their friendship. The fact that Naruto grimaced only made her angrier. She wasn't exactly a mother hen, but she also wasn't the type of person who could remain indifferent to the horrific things that were happening to a helpless young child. Naruto muttered, "Not really," as he looked down. Ayame waited calmly for Naruto to continue, and she could hear her father stopping the cooking to actively participate in the conservation after noticing that Naruto appeared to be no longer hungry, a sign of how serious the situation was. It was a rare sight to see Naruto's face contorted in intense thought when he looked up once more. While the boy was by no means stupid, he was also not particularly a deep thinker. No, scowled Naruto at the end. That's the problem. I think he's a friend and I don't know what to do. I never had a friend. I see some children doing some stuff with their friends, but when I do that, they look at me like I did something wrong. And then the adults say that it's dangerous to play with me. So is something going to happen if I play with Madara too much? What if I do something and Madara looks at me like I did something wrong? What if he's going to hate me like all the other people? What? Ayame screamed, Naruto. And Naruto stopped talking, his hysteria growing with each word. Naruto appeared to freeze in horror at what he had just said when he heard the yell. That was not what he had meant to say. Naruto barely stopped himself from flinching as warm arms slowly encircled him in a tight embrace. It was cozy and warm, like the embraces of Madara and Gigi. He was aware that other boys his age objected to their mother's embraces, considering such physical affectionate gestures inappropriate for young children. However, if it meant that he could feel so cozy and warm more frequently, he wouldn't mind being referred to as a baby. He allowed himself a gentle smile as he tucked himself even more into her embrace. He tensed a little when he felt a hand suddenly grab his shoulder, but as soon as he realized who it belonged to, he relaxed. Tucci gave him a shoulder pat. You know what? Why don't you bring along the fellow with you the next time? We could give you some tips after we've met him personally, Tucci said, making every effort to avoid coming across as overly doubtful of his own initiative. He was genuinely unsure of his feelings toward Naruto's alleged friend, and based on his daughter's expression, Ayame was similarly unsure. But when he saw Naruto's face light up at the suggestion, his doubts soon disappeared. He left Ayame's embrace in a flash, and a moment later the father and daughter could only make out Naruto's tiny figure in the distance. That's awesome, Dadbeo. Right, I'm gonna go find Madara and then we're gonna eat all together. He didn't quite understand that you actually meant to bring him along on another day and not now, did he? Ayame responded with a sweet drop. With that, they both returned to their work. I suppose he didn't, Tucci agreed. We should prepare some more bowls. Naruto has only eaten a bowl and a half, and chances are high that his friend has a big stomach too. Naruto sprinted at full speed, mentally reviewing the potential locations of Madara, barely noticing the strange looks he was drawing because he had grown too used to them. The location of their initial encounter. The spot where they shared that embrace. The academy, perhaps? He simply intended to travel everywhere. Dadbeo. He decided to go to the closest location where Madara might be and turned the corner. His eyes widened when he noticed someone blocking his path, but it was too late to stop, and the blonde fell to the ground as they collided. Over Naruto, a voice said, "Are you alright?" He massaged his forehead and blinked slowly. The individual he had previously encountered was roughly Madara's age and had gray hair. At the moment, he had his hand extended and was staring at Naruto with concern. For a few moments, Naruto couldn't stop staring at it. Eventually, he was able to gather himself and reluctantly grasp the hand that helped him stand up once more. At first, he had only planned to keep running and ignore the sarcastic comment that was certain to come next. However, it turned out that the person he had collided with was okay, and Naruto would feel guilty if he simply walked away without saying anything more. Naruto managed to say, thanks, at last. Thanking strangers wasn't something he was used to. The boy returned the smile. It's alright. What's with the hurry? Naruto told him, I've gotta find a friend, as he began to grow impatient. That boy was pleasant enough, but he was determined to find Madara. The boy went on to ask, what's the name of that friend of yours? Naruto quickly said, Madara, and began to slowly back away. When he heard the name, he stopped when he noticed a strange look on the boy's face. However, it vanished in an instant, leaving Naruto uncertain as to whether he was dreaming. Yes, I really want to go search for him now, so see ya later, he said to the boy, shaking his head slightly to clear it. As he turned to run away, a hand pulled at his shirt. He turned around to the boy again, annoyed. He complained, crossing his arms, what? The boy said to him, I know about him. Really? Perhaps the boy was aware of Madara's location. Yeah, he's pretty known in the village by now. Have you already looked for him at the Uchiha compound? If rumors are correct, he's been adopted into the clan, so that's most likely the place he's staying at, the boy with gray hair suggested. No, I didn't, said Naruto. The idea of visiting the Uchiha compound made him uneasy, and he was unsure of how to describe it. One of his classmates once claimed that girls had cooties or something similar, and that if you got too close to them, you would catch it. The Uchiha were a strange group, and they were actually going to the place where all those strange people lived. Did the strangeness of the Uchiha spread? He didn't want the villagers to think he was even stranger. When he suggested, "How about I accompany you to the compound?" the other boy must have sensed Naruto's uneasiness. Naruto's eyes squinted suspiciously. Most of the time, those who were willing to assist him had ill intentions. This time, though, he looked more closely at the individual's face. It was once said that a person's expression revealed their thoughts. He was willing to try again even though he was terrible at that. The individual's lips formed a sincere smile. In fact, he exuded sincerity in every way. Naruto wondered absently if he had succeeded in reading expressions for the first time, but something inside him told him that he could trust that person. But he couldn't think about that for long because he kept looking at the boy who was waving a hand in front of Naruto's face. He repeated, "Oi, don't just fall asleep. Do you want me to help you?" "Yeah." He hoped he wouldn't regret it. The boy said, "Great," clearly pleased for some reason. "Then let's go. I'm Shin, by the way." "I'm Naruto, Datbeo." Nothing at all suggested that Shin was impacted in any way by that new information, save for the slight widening of his eyes. Given that it seemed like everyone in the village knew him by appearance, Naruto thought it odd that Shin had not known him before. The blonde thought perhaps that Shingai didn't go out much. His train of thought was cut short when Shin grabbed Naruto's hand and started to gently pull him along. Naruto asked, attempting to free his hand from Shin's hold, "What are you doing?" "Well, I always held Sai's hand. He's about your age and he seemed to like it," Shin said. Naruto objected, "But I'm not that weird Sai guy," after he had finally succeeded in freeing his hand from Shin's. Shin let out a sigh. "No, I suppose, you're not. Anyway, we should probably hurry." Naruto shouted, "That's what I want to do the whole time, Datbeo," and bounded off, leaving Shin behind. "Hey, wait up, blood." Oddly enough, as Madara opened his eyes and slowly sat up, that was the first thing that came to mind. The first thing he saw were bars, and for a while he could only look at them stupidly, as if they were an idea too foreign for him to understand. A voice said, "Finally woke up, eh?" Madara turned his head slowly in the direction he assumed the voice had come from. Shisui. A languid smile tugged at his lips as he relaxed his posture and leaned against a wall. However, Madara could tell he needed to exercise caution because of the hard, sharp look in his dark eyes. He croaked, "Shisui." His throat felt dry and hoarse, and he could feel a tiny, grating pulse pounding inside his head all the time. Shisui walked up to Madara and lowered himself so they could see each other directly. He said, beaming broadly. He laughed and said, "You sure gave the clan the shock of their life." His voice trailed off. "Why are you here? Where am I? What ha? Ha?" Shisui flickered away and reappeared rather quickly, holding a cup of cold water. Shisui commanded, "Come closer," and Madara grudgingly complied, swallowing the last of his pride at the prospect of cold, wet water. Shisui instructed him, "Now open your mouth and raise your chin," as Madara's face was almost against the bars. Seconds passed as he drained the cup until not a drop of water remained, and he was rewarded shortly after as he felt water filling his mouth. His throat seemed to sing with delight as he swallowed. Shisui carefully set the now empty cup down on the floor while maintaining eye contact with Madara. "You know," he said, his expression oddly captivated. "If someone had told me that I'd be practically babysitting Uchiha Madara, well, I'd have probably laughed my ass off. Life's strange as that, I suppose." "What do you mean?" Madara asked slowly, blinking away the sudden surge of fatigue in his eyes. He felt weird. His mind was blank, his body felt numb, and even breathing seemed to be too exhausting for him. "What have you done to me?" he added in a slightly more passionate tone. Madara would have gritted his teeth and given Shisui his most menacing death glare if he had been in a better physical and mental state, but he wasn't. Shisui took his time to respond. He was forced to wait while quietly pinching himself to keep from falling asleep. Shisui finally responded. "In response to your multiple responses, let me first explain that you are in the custody of the military police, which means that, to put it simply, you are a prisoner of ours and have the few rights that go along with it. Normally, you wouldn't be privy to this kind of information, but since I understand what it's like to be in the dark, I'm willing to give you a briefing on some basic information, even though I suppose it wouldn't make much of a difference if I did. First of all, as you might have guessed, you are incarcerated by the KMP. Normally, we would place inmates of your caliber in the high security facility, but the Uchiha clan would prefer to keep our discovery a secret because they are under the jurisdiction of Konoha's I&T department." Finding? Madara repeated, hardly understanding what Shisui had said. Something flickered in Shisui's eyes, and Madara unconsciously backed away at the sudden killing intention emanating from the shinobi in front of him. "Yeah, our discovery," Shisui confirmed. His eyes widened as he noticed the shift in color from black to red. "Would you mind explaining to me how my revered ancestor Uchiha Madara, who should have been dead for a century, is imprisoned in this cell? Tell me how you obtained that child's body, please. I'm hoping you haven't taken an innocent child's body." Madara's silence didn't stop Shisui from asking more questions, saying things like, "Have you been alive the whole time? How did you make it through? Senju Hashirama. Sama should have killed you if history books are to be believed. When was the last time you handled a young, healthy body? Are you responsible for the attack by the Kyuubi?" Something inside Madara boiled when he heard the word, Kyuubi, and after briefly battling the fog that was obscuring his vision, he angrily demanded to know, "Kyuubi? What are you saying? How on earth am I supposed to be responsible for its assault?" Uchiha Madara's battle against the Shodai proved that he could control the Kyuubi with his eyes, as everyone is aware. 7 years ago, in the middle of the night, the Kyuubi appeared out of nowhere. It was probably under control, even though it might have acted impulsively and destroyed half the village before the Yondaime intervened. However, nothing was ever proven. That is, up until now. What the clan is still talking about baffles me. The choice would have been made already if it were up to me. I've always hated politics. They always make things much more complicated than they actually need to be, he said, letting out a sigh and running his fingers through his curly hair in distress. "We are unable to simply touch you because you are a Konoha citizen. The things we are doing now are completely illegal, and we will be held accountable if something major occurs." For once, they would be correct, but the clan cannot currently afford that. Not right now. I guess that's a classic example of luck in the situation. Shisui's explanations were difficult for him to understand, so he repeated his demand, "What have you done to my body?" "Pretty demanding, isn't it?" "Sorry, I won't tell you," Shisui said nonchalantly, after Sharingan had once again deactivated. "The likelihood that you won't be able to escape at any time soon increases with your level of awareness." He had put it this way, "So it's a genjutsu?" Shisui grinned and said, "Perhaps not, you know, it might just be me playing tricks on you." He would have protested, demanding that he tell him everything, if Madara hadn't been in such a bad state. The pain in his head seemed to repeat itself, and he groaned and fell to the ground once more. "You feel a little shit right now, don't you?" Shisui inquired, his smile concealing any potential anxiety. Madara summoned his last remaining strength and gave him his most menacing glare, which only caused Shisui to laugh. "I guess you do. That thing was made especially to do just that, to give its victim that feeling. I'll stop bothering you now, but I have one last question. In any case, you don't appear to be in a fit state for questioning. When you used your Mangekyo to put Fugaku-san and the other officers under Genjutsu, what was exactly going through your mind?" His gaze shifted back into the Sharingan and narrowed. "Well, I can see why you might not want to be seen, given that Konoha isn't exactly welcoming. Therefore, I can see why you might want to trick them by making them remember things that aren't true while they're under the influence of your jutsu so that nobody will suspect you. Even the most suspicious Uchiha wouldn't suspect you of using Genjutsu on every Uchiha present during that procedure, after all. That isn't feasible unless you have the Mangekyo Sharingan, and even though the name seems a little, well, suspicious, who in his right mind would ever believe that little Madara-kun is in possession of something like that? So I guess the plan could have worked out pretty well. The only catch is that you've fallen unconscious while putting them under your Genjutsu. Because of that we were able to arrest you and render you as harmless as possible while you were knocked out for like 2 hours. You're sort of stupid for not making absolutely sure that your new body can handle the strain of using the Mangekyo, you know?" He finally gave up, an amused grin tugging onto his lips. Madara silently pondered why in the world Shisui was providing him with so much information when he was fully aware that he wouldn't be able to comprehend half of it at this time. The only thing it accomplished was to increase Madara's headache due to the amount of thinking required to at least understand the most important aspects of Shisui's lengthy explanation. Perhaps Shisui was acting in this way for precisely that reason. Madara hadn't found him especially sadistic, but that was just the way life was. It took him a moment to realize that whatever was ailing him was gradually getting better. Though they didn't make much sense at the moment, he was able to think clearly once more. After considering Shisui's explanation, he inquired about the one thing that was most bothering him. What the hell is the Mangekyo Sharingan? He had never heard of this kind of Sharingan before, as far as he was aware. Shisui seemed unable to believe it, and he asked, "That's a joke, right?" Madara sneered, only later realizing that maybe it wasn't exactly a good idea to show Shisui that he had already recovered enough to be able to speak normally. Geez, I'm not lying, but of course, I could trick you into thinking that I'm saying the truth with those special eyes of mine, he said. Shisui, however, seemed distracted by something else and didn't seem to notice that. That's strange, you actually seem to be telling the truth. How's that possible? To be in possession of the Mangekyo but not having a clue about what it is. I didn't even know that I was in possession until you just told me, Madara replied. And I also wasn't even aware of the fact that I had been using it. Shisui raised his eyebrows in shock and said, so you're trying to tell me that you just unknowingly put Fugaku-san and several of the present officers under an A, perhaps even S-level genjutsu? Madara said, well, I was sort of panicking at that time, as she straightened her posture. Not being able to look Shisui in the eye made him uneasy. Maybe it has reacted to that panic. Something like that occasionally happens with the regular Sharingan too, right? He said, irritated, stressing slightly that he still didn't know what the Mangekyo was. Shisui agreed and hummed. That might be the reason. Do tell me though why you felt the need to be panicked about having your memories seen. I mean, it wasn't like we forced you. You agreed, or that's what was at least told to me. Unless, of course, there is a reason that makes you feel hesitant about revealing too much of your past. I would like to see you acting calmly, while a bunch of strangers, clan or not, are reading your every thought. Things you would rather not want to be seen by people who barely know you, especially if it's not even necessary for them to be seen to check whether I'm trustworthy or not, Madara barked. Naturally, that wasn't the primary cause, and based on Shisui's expression, he also recognized that. He was barely able to hold back a sigh when he concluded that it couldn't get any worse by telling Shisui the whole truth. Actually, given the current situation, Shisui might be able to escape that mess unscathed if he told him what had truly happened. Madara's dark eyes flickered with grim determination as he said, I'm going to tell you everything, and then I suppose it's up to you of what to make out of it. Shisui remarked lightly, partly recovered, smiling as he watched Madara's eyes enlarge with surprise. Don't worry, that's intended. While you still won't have any access to your chakra or be even in the position to use your body properly, your mind will soon return to its normal state. Useful for interrogations. First, using the prisoner's weakness so that later on they will spill out all their dirty little secrets when they can actually speak properly again. It's hard to get anything out of a person when he's acting like a dimwit. I'm getting off the track again. Tisk, that's really a bad habit of mine. Never mind, shoot, Madara. Madara raised his eyebrows a little at that odd order and started to explain. Shisui appeared to be thinking deeply after he was done. He eventually turned his focus back to Madara, and Madara flinched a little as his red eyes seemed to pierce him. Madara's continued survival would probably depend on what came next. Shisui looked troubled, as if he wasn't sure which of his two explanations was more plausible. Either you're one hell of an actor and inhumanly strong on top of that so that you're somehow able to resist my manipulation even in this weakened state, or you're really telling the truth, he finally said. In complete confusion, Madara questioned, manipulation? When had it begun? Even though he was weak, it was concerning that he hadn't detected the least indication that his mind was being altered. Since Shisui had repeatedly activated and deactivated his Sharingan during their, interrogation. Like conservation, there had been numerous opportunities for a manipulation to begin. Madara was reasonably certain that, at the very least, the interrogators joking and smiling weren't typical interrogation techniques. Well, it's wrong to say that it was a real manipulation because that would put too much of a strain on my eyes and I don't really feel like risking it. You see, what I've actually done is to make you deactivate some part of your thought pattern which makes you subconsciously suppress signs of lying, and I've also sort of, nudged your mind to be more willing to tell the truth. It's really only a minimal alteration of your mind and can be fought off, although in your state it's supposed to be nearly impossible to do so, Shisui clarified. Madara blurted out, I see, unsure of how to react. If you're able to use such a convenient kind of manipulation, how come you haven't used it earlier when the clan was still wondering about my real identity and such? Shisui rolled his eyes as if it were clear what the answer was. For exactly the same reason why I don't seize control of the council and the Hokage and control the village from its shadows. Because using that is really straining my eyes, and it's something you can't use whenever you feel up to. Even using this weakened kind of indirect manipulation eats away at my chakra, and my eyes currently feel like someone has thrown acid into them. That's why I only use it whenever it's absolutely necessary, and up to the moment when your real identity was exposed the situation had never really warranted it for me to use it. After all, there were other relatively easy alternatives. Like Fugaku-san checking on your memory with the Sharingan. Well, so much for that, hissing. You're being surprisingly honest about your various strengths and weaknesses of your special eye technique, Madara said, and you talk much. Shisui defended himself by saying, yeah, I know. Well, Sumi. Having a best friend who you could easily mistake for some particularly talkative rock does wonder to your conservation skills. Besides, what could you do with the information I've given you? If you're telling the truth, you're probably weaker than me, even if you were on top form, seeing that I know what the Mangekyo is and thus can properly use it. If you're not telling the truth then you're basically the infamous Uchiha Madara in a child's body. I'm sure you've figured it out on your own by now. It made sense. Well, I'm telling the truth, and now that you know my situation, can you tell me what's going to happen to me? I mean, the clan is probably assuming that things are worse than they actually are, thinking that it's the adult me being in a child body, Madara said. Since it wasn't the most urgent issue at the moment, Madara decided to ask later. He still wanted to know what the hell the Mangekyo Sharingan was, but Shisui was being surprisingly evasive and tight-lipped about it. Thanks to you only using a half asked Genjutsu. Even if it was quite powerful, we were able to break it fairly quick, and Fugaku-san and the others were able to recover immediately. After their recovery and the decision to temporarily hold you prisoner in one of our cells, the clan has decided to hold a clan meeting in which it will be further discuss what we're going to do with you. They've been on it for quite a while and it doesn't seem as though it's going to end anytime soon. So until then, I suppose, we can only wait. I'm sure that they will soon call for you. When I got something for you to drink, I've also told another Uchiha that you've awoken, so I'm fairly sure that the others at the meeting know it by now too. Shisui looked up. With his back against the wall, he plopped himself down once more at the opposite end of the room. You might as well take a nap. Looking at the way meetings usually go, it will take a while before they have decided on anything and are in the position to call for you and hear out your opinion on the matter, Shisui said with his eyes closed. Madara silently agreed that it would be a good idea to take a nap at this moment, allowing the fatigue he had resisted since the start of the conservation to finally overcome him. We're lost, right? Deadpanned Naruto. Shin broke out in perspiration. With a tense laugh, he said, maybe? Naruto scowled and remarked, everyone knows where the Uchiha compound is. I mean, it's like really big. You're not from this village. That would account for the boy's amiable behavior toward him. The fact that foreigners appeared to be more amiable than his fellow villagers was odd. Normally, wouldn't it be the other way around? I am, said Shin, in contrast. It's just that I'm busy training, so I can't go explore the village like you. Naruto was going to point out that you didn't have to look around the village to find the compound, but there was another aspect of Shin's statement that caught Naruto's attention. With sparkling eyes, he exclaimed, training? You mean ninja training? Cool, can you teach me some neat technique? Madara did promise to teach him some techniques, but he didn't want to wait around for too long because he wanted to outdo all the Hokages who had come before him, which meant becoming one before them. Furthermore, it was always better to have more teachers so that you could learn more amazing jutsus, Datbeo. Shin made the kind suggestion, let's find the compound first before we decide to do anything else, okay? Naruto crossed his arms and sulked. That sounded like the same justification Gigi would use each time he asked him a delicate question. After this and that, it was always later. Knowing from experience that insisting on his request for training would not change anything, Naruto sighed and glared at the boy beside him, who chuckled lightly at the younger boy's antics. Follow me, the blonde said, gesturing up and down. Fortunately, the great Naruto Sama knows a shortcut which will get us to the compound in a flash. Shin obeyed, shaking his head slightly in amusement, wondering in private if all the kids outside of Root were like this. Despite her best efforts to conceal it, his mother was concerned, his father was ill, and his Aniki was still on this pointless mission. Snarling at the kunai he was holding tightly, as if the weapon were to blame for this unfortunate circumstance, Sasuke declared angrily that it was all this foreign boy's fault. His arc eyes were determined and calculated, and he started to focus after loosening his hold a little. He threw the kunai in one fluid motion, and shortly after, he heard the gratifying thud of the kunai striking its target precisely. Sasuke gave himself a smug grin, but it vanished as soon as he realized that no one was there to observe his advancement. He scowled as he trotted to retrieve the kunai from the scarecrow, which had a bull's eye painted on its head and was his practice target. But he decided against it and let himself fall to the ground, resting his aching muscles. Being a shinobi required concentration, and he wouldn't benefit from continuing his training in his current condition. He closed his eyes and allowed his thoughts to wander over the recent occurrences in the hopes of finding a potential solution to his queries. As usual, no one had bothered to tell him what had happened. However, he was aware that something was wrong. His mother was rarely concerned, and if she was, something had gone wrong. He persisted in pestering his mother until she eventually gave in and informed him that his father had unexpectedly become ill. It was difficult for Sasuke to imagine his strong father getting so sick that his mother had to worry about him. That thought caused something inside of him to tighten, and the atmosphere in the compound change. Ordinarily, he probably wouldn't have even noticed, but because his mother was so reticent and anxious, he had been frantically looking for any clues as to what might have happened to his father. He had noticed at that point. Several Uchiha appeared to be acting as though nothing was wrong, but their movements, their quiet voices, and the way some of them were giving him subtle worried looks that he probably wouldn't have noticed at another time. He was unsure of the cause if those weren't obvious indicators that something was very wrong. The sudden pain in his hands made him wince in surprise. He was shocked to see how deeply his fingernails had penetrated his palm skin. Sasuke unclenched his fists and told himself to relax. He took deep breaths and, as he stood up to sit up straight again, mentally counted down from 10. It wasn't very helpful. Where was Itachi? Damn it. His sibling would be aware of what to do. He would explain the situation to Sasuke. He might be able to restore father's health. He could get rid of this dumb Madara. Sasuke. Sasuke turned his head at the sound of that voice he would hear everywhere, and his eyes widened when he saw his brother standing in front of him, still in his Anbu uniform. Itachi was able to walk around in full Anbu regalia without anyone noticing because membership in the Anbu troops was supposed to be a secret, but in the Uchiha clan, that was only a secret in name. But he didn't do that very often because Itachi still wanted to follow the rules in some way, or at least that's what Itachi had told him when he had questioned his Ni-san about why he wasn't always wearing that stylish uniform. It appeared that a lot of things went wrong today. His amazing big brother Itachi appeared distressed. There was never any sign of weakness from Itachi. He was acting worried, just like his mother, even though that was sort of an unwritten rule. Was the situation truly that dire? Unsure of where to start, Sasuke said, Ni-san. Itachi instantly hardened his expression, appearing as resilient and unflappable as ever, upon hearing Sasuke's excruciatingly feeble voice. Somehow, when he saw that, the barrier preventing the words from escaping his lips was broken. Father is ill, he exclaimed. Ka-san is really worried and I don't really know why. No one's telling me. I bet it's that Madara's fault. That bastard has done something to father. Ever since he's here, things became strange. Please, Ni-san, do something. In order to give him the impression that everything would be alright, Sasuke had hoped his brother would smile reassuringly and say words of consolation. That everything would be fixed by his great brother. What caught him off guard was the unexpected display of pure, unadulterated shock, fear, anger, confusion, and a host of other emotions on his brother's face. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. Madara? Itachi asked in an uncanny silence, his face as expressionless as ever, and it seemed that he had complete control over everything. A tiny voice in Sasuke's head informed him that it was only a delusion and that, like a genjutsu, it would eventually break. He told this voice to stop talking. When he saw Itachi's eyes harden, he jerked in complete surprise. Itachi then gave him a chilling voice and said, "Tell me where Madara is." "What you're proposing is idiotic," yelled an elderly Uchiha woman, making wildly erratic gestures. The man whose proposal had been questioned growled, his eyes shining with barely contained rage. "Idiotic?" he asked. "Woman, what do you know about politics?" Not even trying to conceal his smug smile, he went on after observing her silence. "I thought so. It's the best thing we can choose to do right now, considering the circumstances." "It's too risky," blasted another Uchiha. "Are you even aware of the possible outcomes if your great plan fails? They would be disastrous." The previous man questioned, "Why do you think that anything at all will even backfire?" He addressed the entire group seated at a long table, asking, "Do you doubt the clan's ability to control the situation that much? Is there anyone sitting here who has even a shred of clan pride?" The entire hall, which was underground in one of the Uchiha clan's many covert hideouts, was immediately filled with outraged protests. Only when the clan head's hand struck the table loudly did it become quiet. "I was under the impression that we have met to discuss what we should do about our latest addition to our clan, not to argue and make petty snide remarks like some immature brats," Fugaku said after he had gained the attention of his clan. Some were decent enough to display shame. Fugaku would have likely buried his face in his hands in frustration if he hadn't gone through that exhausting clan meeting process numerous times before. The clan members had at least agreed on the objective of successfully occupying the village in previous meetings. But at the moment, the goals of every Uchiha clan member were scattered everywhere. In order to be permitted to execute their newest member, some wanted to reveal his true identity to the village. The Uchiha thought he was too unstable to be trusted, posing a threat to their clan as well as the village. It appeared to be confirmed by the fact that he used his Mangekyo Sharingan to attack the clan head and a number of other Uchiha officers. Furthermore, they might be able to increase the village's trust in the clan by sharing such private information with them rather than keeping it a secret and acting independently without the village's knowledge, as the council and Hokage would have probably expected. In addition to temporarily relieving the clan of those individuals, it would, hopefully, restore the village's relationship with the clan and eliminate the need for a coup. The latter, however, had been rejected right away after being expressed by a youthful Uchiha who was overly enthusiastic. That was not how life operated. The clan had become too involved to simply retreat. Not only would the village never change its mind about the Uchiha clan, but it was also too late to change the clan's options. Since Senju Tobarama, the thrice damned Nidame Hokage, established the KMPF and placed the Uchiha clan in charge of it, preventing them from participating in any political affairs at all, the seeds of mistrust had been planted for far too long. Then there was the opposing viewpoint, which maintained that the best course of action would be to keep Madara's identity a secret and to carry out their plan to use him as a clan spy. They thought the boy only had a grudge against the village, and the clan could easily use this grudge to persuade the boy to support them. Uchiha Madara, who was arguably one of the strongest shinobi the clan had ever produced, would surely perform his role effectively, so it wouldn't even be a question of skills anymore. If Madara would even pay attention to them. However, since they all believed that Madara was, in fact, Madara, all of this could be easily disproved. If he was who everyone thought he was, the question of how he could still be alive, in the body of a 13-year-old, no less, came to mind right away. However, if all the stories of Madara were to be believed, it would seem that that man was capable of very little. They were only speculating, though, because whatever the boy thought about it when he woke up could easily reverse whatever they had decided. It hadn't stopped his clanmates from arguing passionately, though. It was this startling discovery that caused many of them to lose their temper during today's clan meeting because they were all frustrated and most of them hadn't had a good opportunity to vent for a long time. Although it made sense, his clan's behavior as a group of especially petty academy students was still unacceptable. I believe that we have now finished discussing all the possible solutions there are to this problem and that what we're doing right now is to only argue about their likeliness of success. I propose that we should discuss the latter once the boy has awoken, seeing as none of the things which you've proposed would work without having the consent of the boy. One of the police officers who had been present during Madara's investigation questioned, what if he refuses? I don't really want to know what is going to happen if he is after our guts. I mean, as far as I can tell, there were quite a lot of reports which weren't all that sure about his sanity or lack thereof, and from what I can tell, trying to fight him won't go down without any sacrifices. Really, we shouldn't wait until he's awake and ready to do whatever's up in that sick mind of his. Let's just kill him. Several cries of agreement followed. Fugaku was so tempted to pinch the bridge of his nose that he didn't even try to resist. This time, everything had to start over. He's still weakened by the drugs we have given him. No one's in a state fit to even fight a child after one has taken one of those. And I doubt that even Madara has built up a resistance to those, Fusao, the police officer, said. Well, Madara should be also dead and buried, if we go after common sense. But if you haven't noticed it yet, he's in one of our cells in a child's body. So do you believe it to be more plausible for him to be in a child's boy than for him being able to resist those drugs' effect? Tisk. Why is he in a child's body to begin with? Shouldn't we also deal with the question whether he's involved with that Kyuubi incident 7 years ago? If he is, then his head should be really chopped off. It's because of that damn fox, that everyone trusts us as much as they would a bunch of Iwa spies. Not to mention, the amount of people who have died during the Kyuubi's attack. Hey, speaking of the Kyuubi, haven't you heard of that one prank the fox brat had pulled off? The one where he has painted the Hokage monument. I heard he has done that with the help of Madara. It's true, affirmed another Uchiha. Saw it with my own eyes. What is Madara up to, getting all close with the Uzumaki? Oh shit, you don't think that he'll set the Kyuubi free again and try to destroy the village? Well, at least we wouldn't have to worry about taking over the village anymore, said a young woman named Uchiha curtly. Angrily, another Uchiha yelled, that's not the time for jokes, Shina. He can't do anything right now anyway, down in his cell, not to mention destroying the village. I still say that we should kill him before it's too late. What's been said about the Kyuubi only reinforces this, Fusao stated. Has anyone even thought about the possibility of that boy not being Uchiha Madara? Asked Uchiha Makoto. Everyone seemed to have heard her and quieted down, even though she didn't raise her voice. The wife of the clan head rarely chose to speak up during clan meetings. Fugaku's eyebrows went up. When the rest of the clan was on the verge of disintegrating in chaos, trust your wife to know what to do. For the most part, he would also keep quiet and wait for the other members of the clan to speak before making a decision. Depending on how one chooses to interpret it, a certain Uchiha who was either bold or dense said, "He has the Mangekyo Sharingan, what more proof do you need?" Her normally gentle eyes became piercing, and Fugaku briefly felt sorry for the poor sod. We all know that our bloodline's secrets are highly desired and that there are some people out there who would stop at nothing to get what they want. Maybe that boy is a result of those people's ruthless actions. In addition, the memories the police officers and my husband could see before they all fell under his genjutsu are not valiant enough to confirm his existence. The Uchiha, whose name slipped Fugaku's mind at the moment, bravely continued to argue. Some of them were rather unexpected and not something people could just make up that easily. Not much is known about Madara's life, especially of his childhood, but none of the records ever said that Madara was friend with Hashirama Senju of all people. The thought alone is so absurd that we can be sure that he is the real deal. Or maybe that is what those people are trying to lead us to believe, she said quietly, without ever looking up. Nevertheless, my point stands. We shouldn't get ourselves so worked up over things when it's not even proven if they are true or false. We should take further actions once the boy has awoken. Killing him now, as some of you have suggested, would still not answer any questions. Questions which unsettle me, and having them answered would benefit all of us. With his death, I fear, our only key to those answers would be gone. Despite their apparent desire to continue the argument, some people remained silent. People were affected by his wife in that way, and he did the rest by giving them his dirtiest look. After what felt like an eternity, everyone finally appeared to be satisfied, or at least they pretended to be, with the agreement they had reached. Until the boy wakes up, perhaps they could finally call it a day. The promise of rest had never sounded so alluring as it did now that his headache had gotten as big as the Hokage monument. He was still getting over the effects of that weird genjutsu he had been subjected to, and it didn't help that he had to go through the ordeal of the clan meeting. Particularly since his clan members had that annoying habit of saying the same thing over and over again. Fugaku was about to express this idea when the secret meeting hall's door abruptly opened, allowing a nervous looking Uchiha to rush in. Still panting from trying to convey the terrible news as quickly as possible, he dropped the bomb without any planning and didn't even bother to follow the procedures for filing a report. Uchiha Madara has awoken. Hell erupted. And this time, Fugaku wasn't sure if he and his wife could work together to restore peace to the situation. "It's sort of quiet," Naruto observed with a small frown. Shin frowned as well, but for different reasons. What were the activities of the Uchiha? Even though it wasn't part of the mission he was given, it would be helpful to monitor the clan, of which Danzo Sama appeared to be extremely cautious. He was suspicious of almost everything, but for some reason, Danzo Sama had a special suspicion of the clan that was known for its Sharingan. Since he was unaware of that specific incident, he was only able to speculate about the Uchiha problem because none of the roots would even discuss their missions with one another. To put it mildly, it was exhausting. Danzo Sama must have had a reason for not telling him, though. Hey, his hand was just inches from his kunai filled pocket as his head snapped to the source of the voice and his body tensed slightly. Being irresponsible would be unacceptable. Shin became so relaxed when he saw an elder Uchiha coming toward him that it was impossible to detect any signs of tension. "Uchiha-san," he said, bowing to him. "Treat the people who own the territory you enter with respect, unless assassinating the owner was your goal." Even though the rules book each child had been given after joining the route was dry, Shin was still in awe that it contained even a sliver of humor. The Uchiha scowled, but they didn't appear to be in the mood to respond to their encroachment with violence. After all, they weren't really breaking any laws. "What are you doing?" Shin weighed the benefits and drawbacks of speaking the truth for a brief moment before deciding that it wouldn't hurt to be honest. "We're here to visit Uchiha Madara." The man's expression, which had suddenly turned hostile, suggested that it did. The man asked, his eyes narrowed, "Why would you want to visit him?" Fortunately, he didn't attack yet. Shin calmly responded, "Naruto-kun would like to visit his friend," ignoring the Uchiha's sudden animosity. When he felt compelled to strike, he trusted his instincts to tell him. The Uchiha's gaze, which had been fixed on Shin the entire time, shifted to poor Naruto, who was currently confused by their current predicament. When Uchiha realized who Naruto-kun was referring to, his eyes widened. You, he spit out. He calmed down just as abruptly as he had become hostile. Shin remembered reading a report about how the Uchiha's brain is affected by the need to unlock the Sharingan. It seems that he had now discovered reliable evidence for a number of its hypotheses. When the Uchiha said, "Both of you leave, right now, it's not safe to be here. We have reasons to believe that a missing nin has intruded the compound." That clarified why there were no people wandering around the compound, but he knew it wasn't the whole truth because of what he had learned in the route about reading people's body language. With caution, Shin questioned, "Shouldn't you inform someone of this? As far as I know, the Anbu is responsible for eliminating those sorts of threats to village safety. We, the Uchiha clan, and the Konoha's military force are more than enough to deal with them. Now, get out." Shin was briefly tempted to stay and look for Madara anyway. If there was a missing nin, he could handle it, after all. However, Naruto's presence prevented him from acting so carelessly. In addition, Danzo would do something that didn't require much consideration. For the duration of this mission, Danzo Sama had given him some latitude, but Shin wasn't positive if an examination of the Uchiha clan went too far. "Yes, we will go now," Shin said with a slight bow. "I appreciate that you informed us of this threat." Naruto screamed, "I don't want to go," with a resolute expression. "I want to search for Madara. That old geezer can't tell us what to do, and if an enemy comes, we can just kick his ass." Though he knew better, Shin was tempted to agree. "We have no right to trespass on other people's home without their permission," he said in what he hoped was a calm voice. "I'm sure we'll be able to meet him again after all has been dealt with," he said. Shin simply gave the Uchiha one final nod and turned to go because Naruto still didn't seem convinced. He didn't have to wait long because he could soon hear Naruto's footsteps quickly following him. "Hey, why do you just go away?" He knew the blonde must be frowning even though he didn't turn to look at Naruto. "We could have totally go and search for Madara anyway. I've been in the compound a lot, you know, and no one's ever noticed me." Shin's eyebrows went up, but he decided not to challenge Naruto about it, instead saying, "You're right." In a poetic way, Sai liked to say that his mind was like a leaf in a storm, referring to his tendency to change his mind frequently. Shin knew that if he left now, he would regret that. And what if everything that happened at this moment was crucial? If he simply allowed that ideal chance to obtain information to pass him by, Danzo Sama would skin him alive. Regardless of what he did, it would be ideal for him to emerge from his next encounter with Danzo Sama unharmed, but doing so required a miracle maker. With his mouth slightly open and his furious babble interrupted, Naruto came to a complete halt. Now, with a slight smile on his lips, Shin turned around. "Naruto," he said, sounding a little condescending. "I'm a ninja and you're an aspiring one. It's all about stealth and so on. It's not exactly clever to keep defy the Uchiha in their own territory." He closed his eyes and dropped to his knees, placing his palm on the floor. They were alone in their immediate area. "Excellent. Naruto," he said to the blonde, whose head twitched with anticipation, knowing that whatever was going to happen would be fantastic. "You mentioned something about being good at sneaking around the Uchiha compound earlier. Care to show me some of those skills?" Once he saw how Naruto's face brightened, any doubt he had about carrying out this so-called operation was swiftly dispelled. Well, Shin thought dryly, at least the boy would have fun. Everything proceeded as planned, but Shin was aware from past experience that eventually the worst would happen, and he was naturally not let down. He saw the boy in front of him, who had appeared out of nowhere, wearing the Anbu uniform, bear the mask, and mentally noted, Uchiha Itachi. After briefly reviewing everything he had ever read and heard about the Uchiha, Shin realized with frustration that the Uchiha heir would prevail in almost every battle scenario he had imagined. It is time to switch strategies. He made his body relax and scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "Ah, hello, Itachi-san. Nice to meet you." Clearly, Itachi did not appear to feel the same way. His eyes hardened even more as he stared at Naruto, asking icily, "What are you doing here? I am sure that one of the clan members must have impressed the severity of the situation on you. It's not safe for people to be here." Lying to Uchiha was pointless, so Shin, with a nervous laugh, said, "Hi, there was one who kindly informed us about the danger, but you know how it is, we still wanted to visit someone from the clan. We're worried that something might have happened to him. Who is that person you would like to meet? I can arrange a meeting between you in a safer place or at least inform you of his well-being if I have knowledge of it." Shin remarked, "That's very generous of you." Oh no, he lost the opportunity to look into it. It's Madara. Shin was aware that he would regret using the name as soon as he did, since it seemed to be a taboo in Uchiha culture and therefore a bad idea. He sensed the slight surge of murderous intent emanating from Itachi for a moment, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The blonde had most likely not even noticed the abrupt shift in the Uchiha's mood, based on Naruto's lack of fear. Itachi asked, but it didn't seem like he was asking, his eyes returning to Naruto. "Uchiha Madara, our latest addition to the clan, I presume," he said. His eyes widened just a little, as if he had suddenly realized something, and then he turned back toward Shin. Itachi said, "I see," with a mask. Like blank expression. Shin could now somewhat empathize with Danzo. Sama's frustration and rage at not being able to turn Itachi into his weapon. Their ranks would have accommodated the Uchiha heir. "As it happens, I was on my way to Madara too. If you wish to, you can accompany me." Shin gave a blink. That had turned out better than he could have imagined. He wouldn't scrutinize a gift, though. He nodded his agreement as he and Naruto exchanged glances. "Lead the way, Itachi-san." Shin was sure that Itachi wouldn't harm them, but there was something strange about the situation. He might be aware of Naruto's true identity, which would allow him to know that he was not to be killed, and he also knows that Itachi couldn't possibly know that he was a member of the Root. For now, they were safe. He was okay with playing along for the time being, but Itachi might have had something in mind. Oh, he definitely had something in mind about them in relation to whatever he had planned during their visit to Madara. Shin reminded himself to be patient. He had always lacked it, according to his teachers. In the end, they'd succeeded in drilling it into him, more or less, like so many other things. Shin thought about that, oblivious to the fact that Itachi was once more observing Naruto with icy, calculating eyes. His younger brother leaned against the wall and folded his arms, asking, "You're going away, again?" Hashirama whispered, "Training," while putting on his shoes. "Since it has been a week," Hashirama reasoned. "Izuna ought to have returned by now. As the clan heir, I've got to get stronger, you know that." Fortunately, the mission he was on 3 days ago proved to be relatively simple, and he was able to return yesterday evening. Hashirama would typically simply take a day off after a mission, regardless of how simple it had been, to unwind and chat with other clan members. He had reluctantly trained a little when his father was around and not busy with other things, but it was obvious that he had no interest in it. That was most likely the reason Tobirama questioned why he had bothered to train in the woods today. At times, his younger brother acted like a mother hen. With red eyes narrowed, Tobirama asked, "That's what I've been wondering about for a while now. But you never really answered my question. Why the sudden change?" With a sigh, Hashirama sat up and got ready to go. "What do you mean by sudden? It's been dawning on me for a while now, but I kept being hesitant. And well, one day I thought I should finally do something about it, and that's what happened," he continued with a shrug. "If that's all, I'd like to go now. See you later." Even though he knew his explanation was completely untrue, he had never been very good at coming up with excuses, and at the moment, he couldn't be bothered. He felt his brother's hand grab his shoulder before he could slide the fusuma open, preventing him from continuing. He turned his head and looked into Tobirama's serious eyes. "Allow me to accompany you, brother. I think that I would benefit greatly if I were able to participate in your training." Tobirama's hand was shrugged off by Hashirama, who grimaced. "It's nothing against you, Tobi, but I would rather be alone in the woods while training. It makes me relax, and I think that's what I need right now." With his gaze swiftly scanning Hashirama's body for wounds, Tobirama asked sharply, "Did something happen during the mission?" He let out another deep sigh and said, "No, it has nothing to do with the mission. I'm just doing it on a whim." It would be an understatement to say that his efforts to ease his brother's anxiety were inadequate. Hashirama tried again, saying, "It's difficult to explain, but you would do me a great favor if you would just let me go alone." Tobirama questioned cautiously, "Brother, is there any reason why you insist on going out alone today?" Perhaps too vehemently, Hashirama denied, "No, there's not. I mean, look, I would have refused you on any other time of day too. Those times I go out to the woods, it means I'm just alone out there. No clan, no enemies, no burden. I can be just me, Hashirama, for a short while. Forget about anything. I think I need that to go on doing what I'm supposed to do, okay?" The only reason he didn't feel like some whiny liar was probably because he was staring his brother in the eye and wasn't even lying. That was the reason he had gone to the woods, away from the critical gaze of his clan, before he had encountered any Uchiha there on the riverbank. "I see," Tobirama muttered. "I never knew that you felt that way." He had to force himself not to grimace. Even though he was usually up for it, he really didn't need to have a heart conversation with his brother right now. It's nothing to be worried about. Everyone has a way to cope with everything. That's just the way I do. This time, he didn't let his brother stop in any way, and before he knew it, he was on the path leading to the woods and out of the makeshift house. Later, he yelled, winking. His brother's eye rolling was the last thing he saw of him. As he ran down the path, Hashirama gave himself a mental pat on the shoulder and laughed quietly to himself. Hashirama, a little breathless, said, "You've been waiting for a long time?" After he had completed ascending the cliff. Izuna said, "An hour," and Hashirama pointed out that he was dressed simply in a black kimono, just like his brother. Even though he knew who he was, it felt good that Izuna had begun to trust him enough to go meet him unarmed. He smiled and took a seat beside Izuna. Drawing out the vowel, he said, "Sue, anything new about Madara?" Izuna's gaze was fixed on the forest that stretched out in front of him. "As far as I know, the Uchiha clan has received no letter from any enemy clans who tried to use Madara as a bargain." Hashirama came to the conclusion, so him being a bargain is probably out. In any case, he hadn't really anticipated that possibility. Izuna turned to face Hashirama for the first time and asked, "Have you heard anything from your allied clans?" He grudgingly shook his head. "I'm afraid not. Nothing about any clan keeping the Uchiha clan heir captive. I even read through my father's parchments, but there was not so much as a word about him. Well, at least the ones that I could understand anyway. There wasn't much to read because his father usually burned messages after reading them if they weren't delivered in person but rather by other means, like birds. He placed security seals on the remaining ones and kept them in scrolls. Fortunately, one of the prerequisites for breaking the seals was that Hashirama and he had the same blood. Even better, he was engaged to a very talented Uzumaki, who was more than willing to teach him a few tricks about Fuinjutsu. However, it was all in vain. It had taken far too long to even describe the first scroll, and there were still others he hadn't read because they were written in some kind of secret code. Since he had been reading scrolls in his father's room while his father was away on a meeting with a leader of a clan that lived half a day away, he couldn't remember ever being more tense and alert for any sounds that would indicate someone had approached. His brother had been busy on a mission as well. Amazingly, nobody had noticed that something had gone wrong, and it had been the ideal moment. Or, if someone did, his father had not heard about his actions. He most likely wouldn't be seated next to Izuna if they had. The idea caused Hashirama to swallow. Even so, Hashirama continued to feel guilty and ill for the next few days before being sent on another mission. His father likely thought he had gone stir crazy because he had no way to vent his frustrations in combat. In reality, a lot of his relatives dealt with similar issues, which would justify his father's belief. You usually knew that you would have grown accustomed to these times of war, sometimes even to fighting, when fighting calmed your nerves more than spending time with your immediate family at home. It was a given that the fight would become ingrained in your life if you were raised with a wooden kunai in your mouth as a toddler and weapons in your hands as soon as you could walk. It was difficult to envision what such a period of true peace would entail, even for Hashirama, whose greatest ambition was to put an end to all of this pointless violence. Perhaps he would never be able to adjust to that calm, with a part of him always restless and craving fights and blood. Every time his mind wandered to that subject, he would adamantly remind himself that it was for the benefit of his fellow ninja as well as the future generation, who would ideally never have to long for violence since they would not have to grow up during a time of war and be blissfully ignorant of its horrors. Izuna snapped, "That doesn't have to mean anything," jarring Hashirama out of his reverie. Maybe this message was too important to be conveyed through written message. It could have been delivered by a messenger. Hashirama gave an involuntary nod of agreement. Many people wanted to speak with the head of the Senju clan because they were such a powerful and influential clan. Many of the messengers were Senju's spies, disguising themselves as clients in order to subtly tell his father who knew what during those alleged audiences. Given the nature of those meetings, it was a very real possibility that he might not have even been aware of it. If he could only find a way to get his father to tell him, although his father was more open to sharing clan-related information than he had previously been, he still tended to keep the clan heir in the dark most of the time. Did he not have faith in me? It was the thought that frequently lingered in the back of Hashirama's mind whenever it became clear that his father had not told him something. Furthermore, he wasn't sure if he could just wait for his father to tell him. Who could have predicted what might have occurred in that time? Hashirama scowled. He said to the Uchiha, "I'm at my wit's end. Do you have any idea how I can make my father tell me about it without drawing suspicion to myself? And what if my father doesn't know anything at all? Imagine how weird that would look," with a hint of trepidation at the thought. Izuna gave him a serious look. His tone seemed to imply that he was being mild when he said, "I do have to agree that you don't seem to be very well. versed in the arts of subtlety. Had Hashirama been unaware that it was the truth, he would have been a little offended. More often than not, his younger brother reminded him that, given their line of work, he was always painfully honest. Since he hadn't been killed yet, he wasn't particularly inclined to alter such a significant part of himself. Finally, the Senju said, "Well, do you have any ideas?" "No, I don't," the response was. "I don't know your father well enough to give you any advice." As he collapsed completely to the ground, Hashirama sighed, "Great, we've reached a dead end." Izuna scowled at the Senju that was resting beside him. "So you've already given up?" "Of course not, but right now we have no clue what we should do next. It can't be helped, so we should just go back to what we did before and wait for some hint which will put us back on track." Izuna inhaled deeply and relaxed his fists, hardly noticing the depth to which his nails had penetrated his skin. "It feels like we're absolutely doing nothing." "No, it doesn't feel like it, it's the same as doing nothing." "What good is that so called alliance, if it doesn't help me at all to find Madara?" He got up at that moment and glared at Hashirama, who got up as well because he didn't like being glared down. "You wouldn't have known then that any information about Madara was apparently not put down in any written form," Hashirama said coolly, despite Izuna's ire. "So what?" Izuna spat, his eyes red with desperation and rage. "How the hell is that supposed to help me? You're just as useless as I've thought. I should have never risked becoming your ally and coming to those meetings. You obviously don't give a crap about Ma." "Be quiet," snarled Hashirama. Izuna was more shocked than afraid, but that was what made her stop talking. The Uchiha gaped at the dark-haired boy in front of him, trying to comprehend that the always laid back, peaceful, and easygoing Hashirama was now furious. Even though he had only known the Senju boy for a short time, he had a gut feeling that it was best to remain silent when Hashirama became irate. It might have been his survival instincts. The Senju calmed down as abruptly as he had become angry, letting out his rage with a long sigh. "Sorry about that," Hashirama said, sheepishly massaging the back of his head. It didn't make the Uchiha any less cautious. "I don't really like to get angry, but what you've just said, well, really pissed me off. I'm pretty sure anyone would have felt angry, hearing that crap you've been sputtering." Hashirama continued before Izuna had a chance to even open his mouth in protest. "I mean, I can understand that you're really worried about your brother, I would be too, and I am worried about Madara because he's my best friend. But what did you expect? That we'd suddenly have all the information thrown at us, once we put all our grudges aside and team up?" Izuna said nothing, her dark eyes fixed on the floor. He appeared to be a grumpy child receiving reprimands. Hashirama smiled as he thought of that picture. "They may be little steps, but they are steps nevertheless. I know it's frustrating, but that's the only thing we can do now. Just be patient and all will be good in the end." Izuna added, "You're overly optimistic." Again, but it was a non-venomous remark. He sounded largely worn out, with all of his aggression gone. Hashirama brightly retorted, "Well, I haven't been disappointed yet," relieved that they could now talk like, well, they usually did. "There's always a first time," Izuna countered, his lips pursed in a smile. Hashirama's eyes glistened mischievously as he noticed Izuna's pale face flushed, seemingly fully understanding the innuendo. "The first time, huh?" In a sort of awe, Hashirama whistled. The fact that it actually worked surprised him. "Wow, you already know about that? At your age, I had no clue." This had resulted in a number of extremely awkward situations that he didn't particularly want to recall. Izuna said in a low voice, "Father told us early on because of the Kekkei Genkei," with his face not appearing to change into any color that didn't resemble a tomato. Hashirama thought fondly that playing with Izuna was as much fun as playing with his younger brother. He resisted the urge to ruffle the boy's hair the way he did with Tobi, a move that had always made the white-haired boy even more irritated. His smile nearly split his face in two. "Ah, I see." Izuna gave him a weary glance. "How the hell can people stand you? I barely know you and I already have to resist the urge to gauge out your eyeball with a rusty kunai." "Well, unlike you, the people that I know don't show worrying homicidal tendencies." Izuna may have decided to stop their banter because he was at a loss for words or because he was tired of Hashirama's inanity, but it's also possible that he was both. In any case, he turned to go. Izuna told him, his face dark, "I have to leave now. Father will become suspicious if I'm gone for too long. He's been watching me closely ever since Madara's been missing." Hashirama asked, looking around anxiously as if he thought he might see Uchiha suddenly leap out of nowhere, "Are you sure that you're not being followed then?" Izuna waved his hand, dismissing his concerns. "My father wouldn't go that far. Not yet, anyway." I just have to be careful when exactly I choose to leave and what excuse I use. I will manage that just fine, he assured Hashirama, who nodded in relief. Hashirama frowned and said, all right, then. How about we meet in a week then? It was inconvenient how they set up their meeting. What if only one of them knew about something that required their immediate attention? Meeting too frequently would only cause unwarranted suspicion on both sides, and they would have no way to communicate with one another outside of their meetings. How about we try to find a way for us to exchange information whenever we want until the next meeting? Izuna said, seemingly thinking along similar lines. I'm sure there's some jutsu out there which allows us to do that. Although Hashirama nodded in agreement, there was still some skepticism. Why wouldn't anyone use such a jutsu if it existed? It could be a clan secret jutsu, of course, that they were unaware of. Then they would have little chance of finding and learning it. Hashirama cleared his mind by shaking his head. He shouldn't quit before attempting anything. Hashirama said, well, then until next week, and waved. Izuna simply nodded before leaving again, just like before. He left without noticing the red eyes that followed him all the way home, sighing for no other reason than that he did what he felt like doing. The voices that drifted down to Madara caused his head to jerk up. Some people appeared to be arguing with one another. Shisui must have sensed the disturbance too, because he got to his feet, stiff and tense. Shisui jokingly said, well, that's a really pathetic attempt at bailing you out, his serious expression concealing any humor. Madara got up as well, but his legs wavered and eventually gave out, causing him to fall back to the ground. Madara told him, I don't know anyone who would do that, while massaging the back of his head. Whatever they had pumped him with, damn it. However, the door slammed open before Shisui could react, and a boy about his age, who appeared to be a Uchiha, entered the room with a deliberate gait, followed by Naruto and another boy with gray hair who was also around his age. Itachi! Cried Shisui, startled. Madara watched the other Uchiha with interest, thinking that was Itachi, Sasuke's brother. He was already aware that he should not be taken lightly. Madara! Why are you here? Naruto yelled as he rushed forward, breaking the lull they had fallen into. Echoing the question, Madara questioned, what are you doing here? The blonde had no place here, and he gave the passive looking Uchiha a fierce glare, as it seemed that he was the one who brought the brat into this whole situation. That is what I'd like to know too, Shisui said, looking at Itachi curiously while crossing his arms. The guards were also supposed not to let anyone in. Itachi clarified, I forced the guards to let me in, so it's not their fault. With a frown, Shisui said, ah, I see, referring to the boys behind Itachi. Why would you take them along? Civilian children shouldn't be involved in clan business. They wanted to see Madara. Shisui responded, yeah, but that's still no reason to bring them along. You're a genius, Itachi, but I can't see anything brilliant in that, questioning Itachi's plans considering that he never took action without cause. Itachi attempted to reassure his best friend, who still didn't seem very convinced, saying, Shisui, believe me if I say that I do know what I'm doing. Shisui responded, you make it sound like I'm some worried girlfriend, even though it's pretty clear who out of the two of us is the girly one, since Itachi could play along if he wanted to make him feel really confused. This wasn't one of the occasions when Itachi genuinely valued Shisui's actions, which always seemed to be unusual. Is it a bad time to ask if Madara can come eat ramen? Naruto asked aloud in the ensuing silence. Dog was quite worried, and he was reasonably certain that this time his worries were well-founded and not the result of another ill-advised attempt to perceive dangers out of pure paranoia. When he saw Naruto and his new friend Shin, who appeared to have no animosity toward the blonde, enter the Uchiha compound, the alarm bells in his head had already started to ring. He didn't feel motivated to go and clean up the mess later because Naruto and the Uchiha clan were surefire to cause total mayhem. He let out a sigh that was barely audible due to the porcelain dog mask he was wearing. There would always be trouble where Naruto went. Dog thought he was fortunate to have hair that could be mistaken for white. During their efforts to keep the unruly brat alive, a few highly skilled Anbu agents had shed a tear or two. He could still clearly recall a specific incident in which Naruto, then 2 years old, was somehow transported to the land of snow. It would have been an understatement to say that he had experienced multiple near heart attacks throughout the course of the ensuing rescue effort. But he wasn't particularly disturbed by Naruto's presence in the Uchiha's compound, whose allegiance was dubious at best. As he followed Shin and Naruto, he was more concerned about the condition of the compound than anything else, to the extent that he thought about telling the Hokage about it. It had the subtlety of the proverbial bull in a china shop, so it didn't seem like the beginning of a coup. That was not the Uchiha's sense. They were still among the most talented ninja clans in the village, regardless of what people thought of them, and it was disturbing on a whole new level for them to be so unruly or strange. As he watched the interaction between Shin and the Uchiha, his intuition seemed to be validated, as the latter's actions practically shouted, "Suspicious." At that moment, the Uchiha heir chose to grace them with his presence just as he was ready to report to the Hokage. He was therefore confined to keeping an eye on the two children and wishing that he wouldn't have to step in and confront his subordinate, with whom he would have to discuss the significance of later keeping his Anbu membership a secret. From the way he walked around sloppily without even bothering to wear his mask, it didn't seem like the Uchiha even tried. Although Dog didn't know Itachi well, he didn't think the two children would be in danger from him. If the key hadn't vanished as quickly as it had appeared, Itachi would have found himself with a pack of dogs strapped to various parts of his body and a kunai at his throat. The sudden presence of killing intention immediately caused him to change his mind. He had worked in this field for too long to write this off as fantasy. However, since the last thing Dog wanted to do was to let the Uchiha know that an Anbu was in the middle of their compound, he would wait before intervening. He was shocked to learn, however, that the Uchiha had offered to escort the two to Madara rather than forcing them to depart. Even though his eyes narrowed, he did nothing but follow them as stealthily as he could. It got more difficult as they went inside, and even though he was skilled at what he did, spying on them in a building with Uchiha Itachi in charge would be difficult for him to do covertly. Should he make a backup call, before determining what to do, it would be very beneficial if he even knew what the devil was happening, but unfortunately, this was not the case. He was therefore at a loss as to whether his direct involvement was even required, and in the worst case, it might even exacerbate any tension that already existed between the village and the Uchiha clan. For now, the dog would wait. He was sure that Itachi would not harm Naruto and his friend, at least not right now. His only indication of what transpired inside was the different chakra auras he could sense, but that didn't mean his entire body wasn't tense to the point where he thought he would blow up during the time he would have to wait outside. After the entire Naruto in the Land of Snow incident, he was even more relieved to see Naruto and Shin leave the building, unharmed, escorted by Uchiha Shisui. And when he received the subliminal message that his fellow Anbu agents were at work, monitoring everything that was going on as the Uchiha clan appeared to be acting even more strangely, any reservations he had about leaving the Uchiha compound were promptly allayed. If only he could discover what had transpired. The silence had started to grow long before Shisui finally broke it. "Well, I'm still waiting for an explanation you have yet to provide." Silently, "I wanted to meet Madara," was the response. "Wait, and for you to do that, you needed to drag two children along? What do you need them for? Sacrifices for the great Madara Sama." Shisui was furious. Shisui understood the meaning of Itachi's prolonged, intense stare, which was something like, "Your continued stupidity is unwanted, cease it immediately or suffer the consequences." However, Itachi would never involve innocent citizens in such a way, so whatever was bothering him couldn't be that serious. Itachi might, of course, be reluctant to speak in front of these kids, but he couldn't be certain of that. Madara demanded to know, "Tisk, you have come to meet me, so what do you want from me?" At least his mental faculties had somewhat recovered, even though his entire body still hurt. Madara's face was the focus of the blank stare. "I merely wished to make the acquaintance of you." Madara's expression was almost as expressionless as the Uchiha's in front of him. "So you have. I hope I made a good impression," he said. Itachi's intentions for this visit were undoubtedly unrelated to polite conversation, especially if he was confined in a cell. "I have heard that you have been adopted into our family," Itachi added. "Yeah, and I was to be made a leaf nin in 1 month, in fact." Naruto cut in. Really, unable to comprehend what had been happening, he finally paid attention to Shin, who had advised him in a whisper that it would be best to do nothing at all and just let things unfold naturally. But he couldn't keep quiet for long, of course. Madara turned to Naruto and was relieved to have a reason to look away from Itachi. "Yeah, didn't I tell you? That's why I visited the academy the other day. To get some books and scrolls so I can prepare for the exam." Naruto sulked, and Madara once more questioned why the blonde was in this place. "No fair. You can already take the exam and I'm still stuck in this stupid school." "Sucks to be you then." Shisui broke in with a smile. "Hey, Itachi, is it alright if I go escort these kids back out? Or have they yet to fulfill their roles in your nefarious plan?" There was a brief exchange of glances that Madara was unable to interpret, but he was fairly certain that Itachi was feeling a good deal of annoyance. After all, Shisui was making every effort to be as annoying as possible, so he didn't blame him. At last, Itachi gave a nod. He said, I apologize for this inconvenience, to Shin and Naruto. Shin shrugged and said, we don't mind. We got what we wanted. Right, Naruto? Madara's gaze grew strained. Who was this Naruto friend? Since Naruto would have introduced them otherwise, it was obvious that the blonde had no true friends and that their friendship could not have lasted for very long. Naruto had to be somewhat pushed out of the room, but he had other issues, so he kept quiet as they went. Madara and Itachi spent several minutes simply staring at one another while making calculations. Itachi was the last to speak. I apologize for the current situation. I assure you this is not the usual way we treat our clan members. Madara gave a snort. I figured. Are you aware of the circumstances of me being here? Madara waited for more, but it was clear that Itachi was not going to go into further detail, to an extent. I don't think you will tell me why you brought them along, right? To his surprise, Itachi actually responded. I assumed that it was safer for them to be at my side, with the clan's current state of distress. Madara asked, why not escort them out? They would come again, seeing as they had yet to fulfill their objective of meeting you. And I was impatient, Itachi said. I wanted to see with my own eyes if it was true. That our legendary ancestor had returned in child form. Being referred to as a child by someone who couldn't be much older than him annoyed him a little because, in the eyes of most people in his own era, he had long since stopped being one. This time, however, he chose to overlook it. He mockingly questioned, and convinced by what you see, I admit that I'm not looking very mighty and legendary, drugged and put in a cell. I confess that I expected something else upon entering this room. At least he was truthful. Touching the bridge of his nose, Madara said, listen. I understand that you are wary of me and you have good reason to be, but believe me if I say that I don't want to cause any trouble. I have enough problems as it is, and trying to antagonize you or the rest of the clan is the last thing I need right now. I see. The expression goes blank. Okay, Shisui was right and he had to agree. If it weren't so incredibly annoying, he would have been genuinely impressed by this Itachi, who seemed to have as much emotion as a stone. Any more attempts at conversation were cut short when the door slammed open and another Uchiha came in, staring at Itachi with a huge frown on his face. I was sent to deliver Madara before the clan council, he told them bluntly. His presence is required. Madara scowled. I assume they have already made a decision. However, the fact that they still desired to speak with him was encouraging. The man exclaimed, you will see for yourself soon enough, as his fingers began to form hand seals. He formed the final one, then slammed his right palm against the iron bars. After the contact, a seal-like shape briefly lingered over the cell entrance before disappearing, leaving the prison cell uncovered. Madara's stiff body betrayed his fear of some kind of reaction as he cautiously emerged from the cell, blinking. Nothing arrived. A hand seized his shoulder in an instant, sparing his face from a painful impact with the hard floor. He cursed in his mind the people who had drugged him. The man made the somewhat unnecessary remark, I see. You're still unable to walk on your own. Madara gritted his teeth and grimaced a little as the man sat down beside him and wrapped his arm around his shoulder. I suppose. Itachi, who had been silently watching Madara look foolish, asked softly, do I have the permission to partake in this meeting? After a brief pause, the man said, of course. As the son of Fugaku, Sama and clan heir, it's your duty to attend. First of all, let me tell you the truth. Shisui can attest to its verity, Madara said. Shisui was the center of attention, but he just shrugged. If it's what I think he's about to say, then yes. It sounds mad, but it's the truth or his mind has been tampered with. Either way, he's not lying, or at least he thinks he's telling the truth. An old woman asked, her eyes narrowed to tiny slits, how can you be so sure of it? He pointed to his eyes and smiled cheekily at her. Deliberate use of Mangekyo, Mitsu.san. I made sure that he was telling the truth, and considering the fact that he had been still greatly affected by those drugs at that time, I doubt that he was able to do anything against it. In fact, he actually didn't even notice until I told him. Fugaku said, I see, his gaze fixed on Madara's face. Well, I'd finally like to hear an explanation for all this madness. Madara fought the impulse to swallow. It was this. He promptly gave them the straightforward explanation because he was never one to mince words. Well, I'm actually from the past. It goes without saying that the clan was not amused. Hashirama. As his brother completed the final swings with his wooden training sword, Tobirama waited calmly. Hashirama wiped his face and lowered his sword, panting a little. What's the matter, Tobi? As he watched his brother put away the sword and take a sip from his cistern, he remarked, I have noticed that you leave quite often lately. After taking a break, Hashirama groaned in frustration and waved his arms. I thought we already talked about it. I just want some peace and… Tobirama abruptly interrupted. Hashirama, his crimson eyes narrowing into tiny slits. His voice was so urgent that Hashirama looked up in alarm. I know about your so-called training. Oh no, the situation had rapidly deteriorated. You do? Hashirama inquired tentatively, his perspiration beginning to trickle down his brow. Obviously. However, I suggest you to meet up with the enemy. People might get the wrong impression. Hashirama was so confused that he didn't even try to hide it. He wasn't sure what he had anticipated in the event that his brother did learn, but this obviously hadn't crossed his mind. Wait, what? That's it? He asked. His younger brother was obviously not amused because he raised an eyebrow. You would never willingly betray the clan, so you must have a good reason for doing this. However, it doesn't matter what your intentions are because this Uchiha is likely to only try to take advantage of you. You're far too trusting, brother. He denied it, saying, no, I'm not being used. He had insisted on this alliance after all, and he couldn't think of a situation in which he might have divulged information that would have benefited Izuna while also putting their clan in jeopardy. Toby countered, you can't be sure about it, and even if that's not the case, don't you think that soon enough father will get suspicious? What do you think he is going to do when he finds out that you are sneaking into the woods to meet Uchiha? He would be labeled a traitor, and according to clan law, traitors should be killed, but… Yeah, I know this. But I'm sure that if I'm going to be extra careful, he won't notice anything. There's no way I'm going to stop now. No, he could not simply leave Izuna or Madara. Some natural law must have been broken as the red eyes narrowed even more. What exactly is it anyways that makes you want to go meet this Uchiha that badly? Don't tell me that you're doing this because he's your friend. This isn't something worth risking your life for, Hashirama. You don't understand, Toby, Hashirama said, trying to maintain his composure. I need to meet him because that's the only way I can find Madara, my best friend. Whom I know nothing about, the arid comment said, and let me take a wild guess. He also happens to be the Uchiha clan heir. Hashirama asked, okay, stop this all. Knowing stuff. Do you keep tabs on everything or what? No, I don't. It just seems very fitting to me that the clan heirs of enemy clans would become best friends. And it seems that the most ironic things tend to happen around you and well, I guess I was proven right once again. I would also appreciate it if you would stop looking like you've just seen a horde of nude men. Hashirama scowled. Ugh. Stop giving me all these gross images, Toby. And, am still stuck on the fact that you haven't started to scream about me being a traitor and a fool for ever thinking that trusting a Uchiha is a wise decision. Tobirama quickly clarified, I have never said that what you're doing is wise, that is. However, I did say that the adults are stupid because they keep on fighting pointless wars just because they can't get over their grudges and see that putting an end to their feuds would be beneficial for everyone. A smile swiftly appeared on his face as he asked, wait, was that approval I heard there? I do not approve of your actions because they're dumb. That hurts, little brother. But, Tobirama kept going, it doesn't mean that I can't see what you're talking about. Actually, you being friends with the Uchiha clan heir is a good thing. Maybe, this battle between us could finally stop once you become clan heads. Well, yeah, problem is that Madara sort of went missing. In fact, he vanished right before my eyes. Okay, I was laughing at that time and didn't see him clearly, but when I stopped, he was gone. And yeah, that's true. I didn't dream it or something like that. His brother's eyebrows were raised when he said the last part, indicating how strongly he thought this was true. Hashirama summarized the events that had taken place over the course of the previous few weeks. Well, and that's why I've gone into the forest lately. I was trying to find some clues about his whereabouts and well, that's how I met Izuna, Madara's little brother. He didn't really trust me at first, but after we talked a bit, we agreed to form some sort of truce and team up in order to find Madara, she said. By the sound of it, he's most likely dead by now, anyway, so why even bother? Hashirama's reaction to hearing these words was more akin to being in a state of complete speechlessness than actual gaping. He had always been aware that his younger brother lacked emotional intelligence, but he hadn't anticipated that he would dismiss someone's life with such ease. Anyone can be affected by war, and he was not happy to learn what his brother had become as a result of the ceaseless fighting. Well, that might be the logical thing to do, Hashirama eventually admitted. But it's not about logic, Toby. That's my best friend we're talking about. I can't just keep on doing things and pretend like everything is normal when I know that there's this little chance of Madara being somewhere, still alive and suffering. Following his declaration, there was a brief period of silence that seemed to be an attempt by Tobirama to stifle Hashirama. At last, a sigh. Fine, brother, have it your way. I can't stop you and I don't want to get you killed by telling it father or anyone else who could stop you. So let me just join this alliance of yours. The way this was delivered gave the impression that the speaker was aware that what he was going to do was stupid, if not outright suicidal, but had been driven to the point where there was no other choice. For the umpteenth time today, Hashirama expressed his disbelief at what he had just heard and once again said, "Wait, what? Yes, brother, you didn't mishear," Tobirama reassured, not even trying to conceal how deeply irritated he was by his brother's ongoing foolishness. After all, someone has to make sure that your idiocy doesn't get you killed. Following their agreement that time travel is simply impossible and their successful recovery of their famous poise, the clan fell silent and turned to face their leader, whose face had remained stony throughout the entire ordeal. Fugaku began slowly, ignoring the hushed objections that he was actually taking this obvious nonsense seriously. "I admit that this is a possibility we have failed to take into consideration," he said. He grinned glumly. The individuals who had been the target of the outspoken verbal insult displayed varying degrees of embarrassment at their clan leader's remarks. Still, it's more likely than some of the things which had been suggested during the clan meeting. Madara found it difficult to hide his incredulity because, in reality, there weren't many things more unthinkable than the idea of time travel itself, and the ability to create such things was an art form in and of itself. But more concerning to him was Fugaku's complete lack of surprise. He had not displayed any overt disbelief, which would have been a reasonable response in this instance given that Madara himself was still having trouble adjusting to the idea of truly being the future, in contrast to the majority of the clan. Madara attempted to rationalize, "Of course, it might be something else, but really, after all these things which have happened since I've arrived here, time travel is the only possible explanation I can think of." Fugaku said, "Ah, I see," as if thinking about something. "Well, the memories we were able to gather did appear to be real." That would help to explain the clan head's response. Despite how ridiculous it was, he had likely thought of this possibility as well. Madara was impressed. "What is your age?" The seemingly random question caused Madara to blink, but she soon recovered and said, 13. "I see." Unfortunately, Madara had no say in this matter at all, with his life in the hands of this Uchiha clan. He bit his tongue and resisted the urge to demand what exactly was to be seen about. He wished that there was a way to remedy this, but it was once again a painful reminder of his complete helplessness. Fugaku stared at Madara during the pregnant silence, weighing his value against the risks, which Madara was certain were numerous. At last, Fugaku stated, "I will allow you to stay as a member of this clan as long as you do not reveal your true origins to any outsider and act as I order you to." At this point, the clan began to have hushed and not hushed conversations, and some even openly protested the decision made by their clan head, who appeared unconcerned by the challenge to his authority, despite his eyes hardening a little. But after some time had passed and the clan had still not quieted down, Fugaku roared, Sharingan whirling to life, "Be quiet, all of you. Regarding the obvious disrespect that was shown to me, I have been far too forgiving, and I promise that if this keeps up, I won't be as forgiving. Anyone who feels compelled to express their viewpoint is welcome to do so once I've granted them permission to do so." After Fugaku's reprimand, the clan fell silent, which caused Madara to simultaneously snicker and scoff at the behavior of the clan. This Uchiha clan obviously lacked the discipline he was used to from his previous clan, but he didn't miss the fact that there were groups of Uchiha strewn about the meeting hall who hadn't spoken yet, and he knew right away that they were the ones he needed to be on the lookout for. Hesitantly, one of the younger Uchiha said, "Fugaku Sama, wouldn't it be best for all of us if we were to finally get rid of this problem?" There was no way in hell that Madara would go down without fighting tooth and nail against this. He tensed at these words and tried to think of a way out, even though he knew it was pointless because most of the thoughts he was having could be thrown out. But for some reason, even though he had previously thought about the possibility of death, there seemed to be a part of him that had never really expected this to happen. There was something surreal about dying at the hands of your own clan, surrounded by them all in apparent safety, which clashed horribly with his own expectations of dying out there at the battlefield, lying at the feet of some gloating enemy. It was just the standard way for a shinobi to go out, or it used to be, anyway. Even he could see that there was no reason for him to live any longer than was required for them to obtain all of his information about his previous life and possibly on some clan jutsu that may have been lost over the past century, but what had been done could not be undone, and he watched as they decided his death warrant in the hopes that he would have a sudden burst of pure genius in the coming minutes. Whether he was a powerful ancestor or not, his presence brought up too many issues, and if there was one thing about the Uchiha clan that would likely never change, whether in the past or in the future, it was that threats to the clan would always be eliminated, sentimentality and blood ties be damned. Fugaku had a strong suspicion that the clan head was acting with some ulterior motive, but he could not understand how he could think otherwise, and his next words only served to confirm his suspicions. No, I don't think such a move is necessary. This information only serves to confirm that he will be helpful to our cause, if anything. His actual identity serves as evidence of his aptitude and ability. The clan head didn't even attempt to conceal the fact that he was using Madara for some nefarious purpose, which Madara found offensive, but he wasn't going to complain if it meant he would survive. As the clan contemplated this in silence, Fugaku's words were able to prevent them from launching into yet another round of protest and complaints. Do you agree to these terms? Fugaku asked Madara again during the pause. As though he had an option. Yes, I do. You are then fired. Take him to his quarters, Akio. Madara almost sneered at this thought, but he wasn't that stupid. At this point, a tall Uchiha with bright brown hair appeared at his side, a hand firmly pressing on his shoulder as if to stop him from fleeing. Akio nodded and said, I shall, Fugaku. Sama, before they vanished. Seeing the final group of Uchiha leave the hall, Makoto had already left, concerned about leaving Sasuke alone at home for a long time. He spotted his son among them and beckoned him to come over, which he dutifully did, his face as unreadable as ever. As anticipated, the meeting had continued for 2 more hours after Madara's leave before even the last one had finally stopped to protest his decision. There were many things Itachi needed to justify, including his presence in the cells and his company, which included, of all things, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and some genin. Fugaku scowled. Fugaku wondered if he knew even less about his oldest son than he had previously thought as Itachi stood in front of him, waiting patiently for him to begin whatever it was he wanted to talk about. Ignoring the looks he got from the Uchiha around him, Shisui laughed and said, Wow, that went well. After his brief conversation with Fugaku at the end of the meeting, Itachi appeared a little more exhausted. I admit that I didn't expect this outcome, he said slowly. So even the brilliant Itachi is unaware of some things, isn't that right? Shisui's smile expanded, if that's even possible. This day just keeps getting better and better. Shisui had raised an eyebrow at Itachi's choice of resolve, but remained silent, knowing that Itachi had finally made the decision to reveal his dirty little secret. Itachi didn't respond until they had left the underground meeting hall and were walking on the road that would lead them to the small lake where Uchiha children frequently practiced the Gukakyu. Itachi eventually admitted, I have my doubts that this Madara is as innocent as he would have liked us to believe. Why? He claims to be innocent, and I'm fairly certain of that. Shisui was certain that Itachi had noticed the bitter undertone in the final words, but of course, you might know some stuff I'm not privy to. Itachi appeared to pause for a moment, obviously uncertain of how much to tell his friend, but the hesitation vanished as soon as it appeared, and he said quietly. Madara and I had previously met, or more accurately, he approached me. On the other hand, he seemed to be an adult in stature when we met. I could have been mistaken for a genjutsu in that form. The fact that this Madara had anything but peaceful intentions toward the clan is what worries me. What did he want from you, anyway? Shisui concluded, his brown eyes furrowed, and now you think that he has somehow managed to get into the clan as an innocent, traveling kid who will later inflict some horrible thing on the clan. I assume that it wasn't a fight to get his revenge or anything like that because you're still alive. Itachi said, his face unreadable, no, adding, he offered his cooperation in the elimination of the Uchiha clan. Shisui was only able to look at Itachi for a few seconds before realizing what Itachi had said. No, did the Hokage give you the order to? But I believed he was still open to talks with the clan. Shisui cried out in desperation, not realizing that time was running out so rapidly. Danzo. Sama. Oh, why don't I find it surprising that this cunning jerk is to blame? Told me that I would have to decide between the clan and my brother's life. And you chose your brother, was not so much a question as a statement. Yes. Itachi had a stony face and unwavering eyes, and Shisui could tell that he had already decided after weighing all of his options and that no one could now influence him to change his mind. And let me guess, I would never have known of your decision until I found myself with your blade in my back? Shisui wanted to give Itachi a hard punch to the face after realizing this, but he restrained himself and instead chose to give him a death glare. In what Shisui hoped was pain from guilt, Itachi's eyes narrowed slightly. I would have told you eventually. When? Just a few seconds before you stabbed me in the rear? His voice had grown louder, and he was having trouble remaining composed. Bitterness left a sour taste on his tongue, but this was nothing new and something he should have expected. Itachi remained silent, and what was silence but another way of affirming himself? Despite their arguments, Shisui was able to relax after they arrived at the lake and saw its surface reflect the setting sun. "It's not like I can't understand you," Shisui said softly as she looked out at the lake. "I mean, it's a terrible decision, but if you didn't want to tell me, I would have really appreciated it if you at least told someone. You know, getting a second opinion usually helps you avoid making decisions you'll later regret." The question of why Itachi hadn't felt inclined to tell him was raised again when he realized that these words were complete bullshit because Itachi was a loner and there was really no one else he could talk to, aside from himself, unless he wanted to start a mass hysteria. Oh no, Itachi and his ardent supporters must bear all the burdens like a valiant but equally foolish martyr. With a deep sigh, he glared at Itachi in frustration, asking, "Is there anyone else you're willing to share me with? Or could you at least provide more details about this Madara situation? The idea that I might have actually assisted a potential danger to the clan and village in entering bothers me." Shisui would have been certain that Itachi was happy about the change of subject if it weren't for the fact that it was Itachi they were discussing. After all, discussing the murder of one's best friend was always seen as an awkward subject by everyone. "I'm not positive that this is the Madara I've met. Despite being familiar, their chakra signatures do not match." Shisui squinted at this, asking, "How is that possible?" He insisted on knowing. It was impossible to alter one's chakra signature unless a completely new one had been installed, but this was not feasible because the body would immediately reject such a huge quantity of chakra, and in the worst situation, the shock would cause death. It was impossible to even gradually infuse a foreign chakra with one's own because, after a while, the foreign chakra would either be transformed into the own chakra or rejected outright. However, since Madara was supposed to be dead, was it really that unlikely that he had somehow managed to swap out his chakra for someone else's? Life was one's life force, and perhaps he had been able to extend his life in some way, possibly even to the extent of reverting to his child form, by using someone else's chakra. "As you can see, there is much room for interpretation," Itachi said, breaking off his thoughts. "Of course, one could also assume that the Madara I have met is just a fake. Ultimately, the recollections of the Madara that we have detained appeared to be authentic." "Yeah," Shisui concurred, "but I'm fairly certain that it's feasible even though I can't immediately think of a method to fabricate memories." He trailed off, looking expectantly at Itachi, who, as far as he knew, had already reached the same conclusions as him and likely had a dozen more explanations for this whole madness. "I mean, with time travel being possible, out of all things," he said. Itachi clarified, "Well, the clan has made their decision and any disobedience on my part will draw suspicion, which is why I am unable to issue a warning. They would undoubtedly want to know where I got this information. And this would be a really bad idea," Shisui concluded, adding, "And what about the village? The Hokage should at least be aware of it." His eyes widened as he realized that the adult Madara was determined to use the Kyuubi to wipe the village off the map the last time I checked. "What? Is Madara responsible for the Kyuubi attack? The Kyuubi could only be subdued by a strong Sharingan, and Madara's would undoubtedly be sufficiently powerful." Itachi, "Yes, this might be the case," admitted. Shisui's left eye began to twitch. "So why in the world didn't you tell the Hokage, Danzo, and the clan elders? There is no need for either side to start a war with the other because the clan is innocent?" "Think, Shisui," Itachi snapped back, noticing that the eyes narrowed, which was never a good sign. "Do you really believe that this problem could be resolved so quickly? That this is where the clan would stop? No, they would only feel more justified in what they were doing, and in the worst situation, they would try to form an alliance with Madara to accomplish their objective. I gave Madara a chance to exact revenge on the clan, and he agreed to spare the village. Why wouldn't this apply the other way around?" "So you just want to say nothing and do nothing about it?" Shisui yelled. Shisui, feeling like he was about to burn something to ashes at Itachi's silence, sighed and ran a hand through his hair before continuing in a more composed tone. "Listen. In the event that everything goes wrong, I have a fallback plan, and if things truly seem as dire as you describe, I guess I'll have no choice but to proceed." He hesitated because, although he did trust Itachi, his friend had already shown that he would be the one to lose if it came down to Sasuke and Shisui, the village. Regardless of the repercussions, he would not begin to distrust Itachi now since he had never done so before. "Are you aware of my unique genjutsu?" Itachi gave a curt nod. He did, of course. Shisui thought dryly. One of the few things the clan still talked about with awe-struck voices was his Mangekyo. "I plan to use it on the whole clan or at least the ones who are involved in the coup d'etat," he continued. "They would never think of harming the village again." For some reason, Shisui was not shocked by the lack of enthusiasm for his, in his humble opinion, brilliant idea, and Itachi remained unimpressed. "Are you certain you'll be successful?" Itachi asked bluntly while still managing to express his doubt. "Well, it's still better than massacring the whole clan sans little brother." Shisui chose to interpret Itachi's lack of response as consent. He went on, "Well, I'm not saying that I'm going to do it right now, but is there really nothing else you can do to pull this off? I know you don't want to share all of this, but at least let the Hokage know that this Madara you met could be dangerous. I see no harm in carrying out this action." Itachi shook his head slowly, saying, "He would discover it and we wouldn't be able to find him again. Shisui, you should not undervalue him. I must keep meeting with Madara, and I can only do so if I don't inform the Hokage or the clan about him." "I don't like this," Shisui said, squinting and tilting his head slightly in thought. "Not at all. However, despite my reservations about your plan, I have faith that you won't put the village in danger." He sighed deeply. "I guess if I had to pick, it would be the village in the end. You don't have to worry about me betraying you, at least." For a brief moment, Itachi appeared to grimace, but as was to be expected, it vanished. "Anyway," he went on, disregarding Itachi's response, "what was the point of those two children, anyhow? You haven't told me yet?" To reassure myself of something, I needed Naruto to go with me. Since this would have taken up too much time and I wanted Naruto to accompany me voluntarily, I refrained from forcing his friend to leave. Had discretion been required, I would have easily applied genjutsu to him. "I understand. Furthermore, you won't go into further detail despite the fact that you are aware that I am aware of Naruto's secret, right?" Exasperatedly, Shisui asked. "No," Shisui sighed and said, "Okay, be that way. He would not bother for the time being because there are plenty of other chances. I have to leave now, anyhow. I just realized that I had an appointment with the Hokage." He turned to go, figuring out how much time he had left in his head and concluding that he would never be on time. He forced himself not to sigh. The Hokage would understand, surely. Itachi calmly stated, "Then I do not wish to be the cause for your tardiness," as though the little shit was unaware that the reason their conversation had lasted so long was due to his verbal avoidance of his questions. The elder Uchiha glared at him before vanishing in a cloud of smoke, leaving a sullen Itachi in his wake. It would have been an understatement to say that Madara was glad he was still breathing. If he had understood correctly, which he was certain he did, then whatever the clan was planning was big and he would be right in the middle of it. Fighting with his life on the line for a clan he definitely did not feel he belonged to was the last thing he wanted to have on his to-do list. He hadn't really expected things to go this smoothly, not that he was complaining, but it still made him cautious of the times ahead. The two of them had not been at Fugaku's house long, and as soon as they entered, they were met by the anxious Sasuke, who had rushed to the entrance of the house after seeing the two Uchiha approach. In his hurry to descend the stairs as soon as possible, he stumbled and would have fallen on his face if Akio hadn't caught him. With a flushed, "Thanks," Sasuke turned to Madara, his dark eyes narrowed in suspicion. "What is he doing here?" Sasuke demanded, pointing a finger at him. Madara swatted the finger away, saying dryly, "I think it's because I'm living here." The finger had been too near his face for him. "I trust that the two of you will behave," Akio said as he turned to go, acknowledging that he was not needed or rather that he didn't feel like acting as the mediator. He vanished in a cloud of smoke before either of the two Uchiha could voice their, for once, united protest at being treated like infants, leaving them alone. They both looked at each other warily for a while before Madara finally said, "I'm going to my room." For good measure, he added, "I'm tired and don't you dare disturb me," glaring at the younger Uchiha, who appeared to be about to lash out at him. Madara began to head upstairs, deciding he had wasted time and certainly wasn't up for another argument. Sasuke bit his lip, unsure, and stared at Madara's back, saying, "Wait," it exploded from him. Madara turned around and arched an eyebrow, as if to convey the message, "It better be worth it." Sasuke paused, finding it difficult to articulate his ideas. When Madara saw this, his face softened a little. Though he was a brat, Sasuke was still, in a sense, the last of his younger brother Izuna, and the thought of him made his stomach knot. Unaware of Madara's abruptly upset look, Sasuke found the right words to express what had been bothering him all day. "What's going on? Nobody wants to let me know. Has something negative occurred?" Itachi, who never loses his temper, looked very irate. "Don't worry," Madara said quickly, suppressing a sigh. "There is no need to be concerned about your father's injuries. But everyone is tense because of that." He was certain that no one would object if he told the youngest son of the clan head an edited version of the current events. The Uchiha clan can't let someone get away with attacking their leader. "Ah, I see," Sasuke said, His fear gone. His chest puffed up in pride. That's why Aniki was upset. I bet he's totally beating these guys who hurt my father right now. His face brightened. Madara conceded, yeah, I'm sure he does, and yawned in what he hoped was a very noticeable manner. After blinking, Sasuke nodded to himself and said, I'll just go to bed anyway. After saying, good night, he rushed to his room, and a little while later, Madara heard a door thud. Madara thought, if he wasn't acting like a snot-nosed brat, Sasuke could actually be kind of cute. He also started to slowly walk toward the room. His room, he reminded himself, which would remain that way for an indefinite amount of time. Well, there was at least one bright side to this whole mess. He could sleep much more comfortably. He only bothered to take off his shoes before letting himself drop onto the bed and savoring the comfort of the blanket and cushion. As for the endless list of drawbacks, well, there was no better time to begin worrying about them than tomorrow morning. That is really foolish. With his hands at the back of his head, Naruto whimpered, I couldn't talk to Madara at all. Shin was just grinning at him in a way that he hoped would be comforting. Shin was more than happy with the information he had gathered, even though they had only been permitted to stay for a brief period of time. Perhaps Danzo Sama wouldn't be upset about his violation of protocol given his newfound knowledge, but he couldn't be certain that Danzo Sama wasn't already aware of the entire situation, which would automatically make his brief visit pointless. It had been a really dumb idea, looking back. Naruto's voice blurted out, hey, Shin, breaking his train of thought. Yes? Do you believe Madara is having problems? With a frown, Naruto asked. Alright. When Shin finally made the decision to say, I'm sure he will be fine, Naruto, for once, didn't respond, and they walked on in silence, each of them preoccupied with his own unsettling thoughts. Shin noticed a sudden surge of chakra, which vanished as quickly as it appeared, but he understood its significance, and he knew it was time to report back to Danzo Sama. Fantastic. He wondered absently how long it would take him to persuade Naruto that, despite his promise, he had to go and couldn't go home with him, but he wouldn't mind if it took half a lifetime. Shin, a recently hired genin who had not yet been assigned to a team due to special circumstances. If only these records would provide more details about those alleged special circumstances. Maybe he was being paranoid, but Kakashi scowled. After all, not everyone who treated Naruto the way every child has the right to be treated had to have some hidden agenda. The records, as far as he could tell, looked official enough, with everything properly signed and stamped, and nothing unusual even in the content of these reports. Although it wasn't common, Genin's lack of teamwork wasn't all that uncommon either, and he had no doubt that the unique circumstances these reports mentioned might be a health problem. After putting the papers back in the drawer, he decided that he would just be happy that Naruto had gained another friend and hope that the two of them wouldn't be in for a rude awakening. Shin's report, it seems, wasn't that special that it warranted suspicion, nor was it too normal to the point that it would have become fishy again. The ceiling looked plain, which was the first thing Madara saw when she woke up. He did not experience a moment of disorientation as he had the last time, but this did not lessen the sense of dread he felt as memories of the recent events began to resurface. The only good thing that could be said about his current circumstances was that he was still alive. Being alive, though, would allow him to look for a means of returning to his Uchiha clan, where he would be the heir apparent. Returning to his little brother, his foolish Senju friend, and the well-known murder. He would also be careful not to lose his temper and unleash a monster on the village this time. Perhaps he could also issue a decree prohibiting the mistreatment of any young blonde boys named Uzumaki Naruto, if he were to become the Hokage. Fantastic. Now he was feeling hopeful once more. It's time for him to break the habit of getting his hopes up. I'll leave now. Ka.san. Otou.san. Goodbye. A juvenile voice cried out. Madara heard footsteps clattering on the floor, followed by the loud sound of a sliding door closing. He began to slowly get to his feet, thinking dryly, well, at least I didn't have to deal with the little brat. He began to slowly go down the stairs and headed toward the room where the voices were coming from. When Madara got there, he saw Fugaku reading something and Makoto preparing breakfast. It was difficult to explain, it resembled numerous folded, excessively large sheets. Looking up, Fugaku frowned as he felt Madara's eyes on him. He gave a friendly nod. Come to my working room after you've finished eating breakfast. Without waiting for a response, he hurried to his feet and placed that piece of paper on a nearby desk. The clan head left the room with another thud, but this one was softer than the previous one. His back was pierced by narrowed eyes until he was entirely hidden. There would be trouble with whatever it was that Fugaku wanted to discuss with him. When he finally stopped staring and turned around, the clan head's wife's cunning eyes met his. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a friendly smile. Now, what would you like to eat, Madara-kun? No, she would never be able to take the place of his mother. Even though they were far-off memories, Madara could still remember his mother's last days with him before she passed away and gave birth to Izuna. Although Makoto frequently displayed the same compassionate and caring side, his mother had been a warm, reassuring, and consoling presence. The subtle strength and cunning characteristic of a kunoichi was well hidden, but it was unmistakable. He had simply been too overcome by shock and emotion to notice it. But based on what he had observed thus far, women generally appeared to be more involved in the activities of the clan and village. It was an odd change, but he wasn't particularly bothered by it because there were many more that undoubtedly required more time to get used to. When he realized he had lost consciousness and saw a smile tug at Makoto's lips, he blinked and, against his will, blushed slightly. After recovering, he said, "If it's feasible, I would like to have Inarizushi." She nodded and grinned at him. "Just sit down and wait, it will take some time." He sat down Caesar style, kneeling, and put his hands on his lap in obedience. He might as well begin mediating while he was compelled to wait. After everything, he thought it would be wise to clear his head and just give himself permission to unwind a bit. The sound of a door opening was heard again, as if a higher power had heard him, and a cheerful voice exclaimed, "Makoto-san. I hope you don't mind if I join you." Madara sensed a twitch in his left eye. So much for tranquility and peace. Shisui plopped down next to him and said, "Hey, Madara," his sluggish posture standing in stark contrast to Madara's own formal and traditional sitting manner. Madara's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly, as if he were trying to back away from him. Shisui appeared to be unaware. Itachi already left, huh? And Sasuke too. Makoto prepared the rice to fill the fried tofu and nodded absently. Yes, Sasuke-kun is on his way to school and Itachi has left for another mission. What would you like to eat, Shisui-kun? Same as Madara, Shisui said, gesturing to Madara with his thumb. I don't want to be too much of a burden. I don't mind at all, Makoto assured them. If you want, you can stay here and train with Madara-kun. Oh, please don't, Kami-sama. Sorry, as much as I'd like to stay, I have a mission too. A rank and on top of that, we're sent to the borders of the water country. This one might take a couple of weeks. Shisui smiled at Madara's evident discomfort and moaned a little, obviously annoyed. Makoto laughed. I'm sure you can handle this and I heard the seafood there is very good. Would you mind bringing me some of it as a souvenir? I would like to try them. Perhaps, I could try cooking them myself. I've always wanted to try something new. Shisui felt compelled to clarify. Well, it's a mission and not some sort of vacation, but whatever, I'm the one in charge of this mission so there's no one there who can write a report on me slacking off. Any specific wishes? Madara found it difficult not to snort as Makoto joyfully told him what she wanted. The village's survival was remarkable if individuals like Shisui were placed in charge of anything. However, it should come as no surprise to Hashirama that some of his foolishness was inherited by subsequent generations of villagers, as he was one of the two founders of this village. It was unfortunate that this disease had spread to his own clan as well. Madara let himself get absorbed in his own thoughts, wondering how everyone was doing in the past, and was happy to let the two Uchiha chatter away. He wondered what Izuna had done as soon as he had learned of his disappearance, even though they were currently dead. Had he failed to notice? Even though he had clearly never done so in the previous century, he still had a sneaking suspicion that he must have broken off or something similar in order to be remembered as the one who had almost destroyed the village. Or had he succeeded in getting back, but he had still abandoned the village and his friend in spite of this knowledge? That would be completely nonsensical. He wasn't really that stupid, after all. When the food was brought to him, he was startled out of his reverie by the mouth-watering aroma, which also made him forget about the past. Madara said, "Itadakimasu," hastily before beginning to eat his food at a rate that could easily compete with Naruto's when he ate ramen. The food was so delicious that he was oblivious to Shisui's jeers at his eating habits and had not realized how hungry he had been. At least he wouldn't be seeing the obnoxious Uchiha for the next few weeks, he told himself. Furthermore, he was skeptical that he would ever trust him again after he had deceitfully manipulated his mind and could do so again at any time. Shisui left for his mission as soon as they finished breakfast, and since there was no reason to postpone this meeting any longer, Madara reluctantly followed Makoto, who was now busy cleaning the dishes, to Fugaku's workspace. After all, the house was pretty large. Finding the room didn't take long. "It's me, Madara. You wish to walk with me," he said, standing in front of the door. "Enter," was the harsh reply, and Madara dutifully followed it. When he arrived, he saw Fugaku seated behind a desk covered in mountains of papers. Madara sat down in front of the clan head's desk and remarked absently that none of the papers strewn across it had been signed. As Madara had hoped, there was no silent-staring content. Rather, the clan chief chose to get right to the point. "I want to apologize on behalf of the entire clan." Once, twice, Madara blinked. This was a surprise. "We are all part of the same clan, yet for the majority of the time you've spent with us, we haven't treated you this way at all. I hope you can partly understand the reason for this behavior. We had to make sure that you do not pose any threat to us." "I do understand," Madara said rigidly, his eyes narrowing a little. "I would have done the same, if put in the same situation. However, what I do not understand entirely is your motivation behind this. You didn't even bother to pretend that you had no ulterior motive. Even though I do not know the Uchiha clan in its current form, I'm still a Uchiha as you've already said. So I do not think there's a reason for you to withhold information, if it's for the sake of the clan." Fugaku heard this and grinned grimly. "I have never doubted your loyalty, at least not after I have found out who you truly are. Which is why I didn't try to hide my plans regarding you." "So you would actually tell me?" asked Madara, asking incredulously. "Yes," said the clan chief coolly. "However, first of all, I would like to remove your seal." "My seal?" Fugaku pointed impatiently to his abdomen. "The seal with which I can pinpoint your location among various other things." With a cautious echo, Madara rubbed his stomach and asked, "Other things?" "You leaving the village borders would have been the trigger," he explained, getting up from his seat and starting to walk to Madara. "If the seal had triggered, you would have experienced great physical pain to the point that it would have rendered you immobile and most likely unconscious too." "Oh, that's good to know," Madara concluded sardonically. As his fingers darted through several hand seals, Fugaku shot back, "Well, seeing as I am about to remove the seal, it doesn't matter anymore." Silently, Madara pulled his shirt up to reveal his belly. When fingers touched his skin, which was beginning to feel like it had been set on fire, he hissed. But just like the last time, the pain passed quickly, and when it did, he looked down at his stomach, which was empty of any symbols or drawings. "Will you tell me now?" Madara asked, adjusting his shirt. The head of the clan returned to his seat and answered slowly. Resuming his seat, he declared, "We are going to stage a coup against the village, much like Madara had done when he abandoned the time-travel scheme." Stunned silence ensued. "We, the Uchiha clan, have been shunned by the village which we have helped found," Fugaku continued calmly, oblivious to Madara's skeptical look. "They treat us with mistrust and it's only a matter of time before we will be absolutely restrained in our movements. Why should we continue to serve a village which only acts against us? A village which suspects us of something we had no part in?" With a frown, Madara asked, "What do you mean?" He wasn't sure what he had anticipated, but a coup was most definitely not what he had anticipated. "The Kyuubi incident," the head of the clan explained, his face solemn. 7 years ago, it attacked the village. Because of our mastery over the Sharingan, we're suspected to be the ones behind the attack. The village doubts that its attack had been on a whim. He had helped found the village and reportedly fought against it as well, but he still didn't think this was good enough justification to fight against it. Why? Why would they think that? Where is the connection between our Kekkei Genkai and them suspecting? He stopped abruptly when he realized that he was speaking to Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara was known for being able to control the Kyuubi with the power of his Sharingan alone. The Biju had been one of his many weapons he had used against the village and was his name. I can assure you that I did not set any fox against the village in my entire life and I don't plan to do that either, but seeing as I'm somehow here, don't you think that Madara is somehow responsible for this attack? This is one of the things I've discussed with the clan after you've left, Fugaku acknowledged. Some did not believe you and thought it prudent to throw you into the cells again, until we found a better solution as to how to deal with you. Some even went as far as to demand for your death, which you might have already noticed. Madara remarked, but you disagreed with them, knowing that other Uchiha consciously desired his death was odd. I did, concurred Fugaku, but I wasn't the only one. Time-travel is an alien concept for the most of us, but the possible implications it holds are not to be trifled with. Some realized that killing you could drastically change the world as we know it now. So you think I'll return at some point and do exactly what I know is a bad idea because it somehow ends up with my clan wanting to fight against the village I have helped found? That doesn't make any sense, Madara argued, massaging his temple. Well, he sensed a headache approaching. The words, "Your entire existence makes no sense whatsoever," were spoken dryly by Fugaku. "We are shinobi, not scientists. There's no way for us to be absolutely sure how you can even exist in this time without us being at war with the Senju or God knows who right now. But fact is that you're here and your appearance has yet to alter anything. The clan as a whole finally agreed that it would be wise not to push it any further by trying to killing you. Slowly, that's reassuring, Madara said. But you still haven't answered my question. Don't you think it could be me who attacked the village? So you're saying that seeing as you're here, even though it should be impossible, it could be also possible that another Madara has survived until now? That he attacked the village again? Do you really think that we would be free of the village's suspicion once I run to the Hokage and tell him that it wasn't us but a relic of our past who was responsible for this incident? He gave a snort. Don't be naive. If an incident like this could make the village mistrust us to this degree, it only shows how much they had trusted us to begin with. No, with people like Danzo, running around and doing as they please in this village, Konohagakure will never change. So neither will we, he continued. This coup, this battle against the village, had been inevitable since you left the village. It was only a matter of time before either of us would have started to fight against the other. I merely made sure that it would be us who would strike first. Madara, feeling ill, demanded to know, is it really inevitable? Did I already see the beginnings of the conflict? Was this the reason why I left and tried to destroy the village? In what way had their innocent, naive, and childish dream evolved into this? Their shred dream, Konoha, and his clan were at each other's throats in a war? I don't know, said Fugaku. It all happened nearly a century ago and I doubt that what the history books have to say about this matter is entirely true. However, I do know that you have tried to warn us before you left. That the village would be against us. It seems that you were right. But why? I still don't understand. Why would the village be against the clan at all? We were one of its founders, Madara yelled. Yes, but so were the Senju. The Nidaime, Senju Tobirama, started this, putting us in charge of the military force. It seemed like he has done us a favor, but in reality, he was only preventing us from having any political say whatsoever and making the rest of the village's suspicion and fear grow even more, Fugaku clarified, sounding as though he had said this before. The question, Tobirama, was one of the many things that had perplexed him during Fugaku's brief tirade. He was aware that he had heard the name before, but he had no idea what the military force was or how this was supposed to be a slight against the clan. Yes, he was the younger brother of Senju Hashirama, whom I believe you know, Fugaku replied with a scowl. So basically he's the one responsible for all of this? Madara scowled and turned her head away. And he happened to be Hashirama's brother, so where was Hashirama in all of this? Dead, I presume, said Fugaku. Hashirama had been the Shodai Hokage and upon his death, he passed on the title to his brother and allowed him free reign over the village. Another Senju? Asked Madara. Shouldn't it have been a Uchiha who should have become the next Hokage? This village has been governed by Senju or people who have been influenced by them since the founding of Konohagakure. The Sandaime had been the student of Senju Tobirama, whereas the Yondaime had been the student's student of the Sandaime. No Uchiha had been even remotely close to attaining the position of Hokage, Fugaku stated. Madara questioned, and Tobirama is to be blamed for this once again? As I've said before, I can't say that for sure as all of this happened before my time. However, he has certainly played a big role in the clan's segregation from the rest of the village. However, it doesn't matter who was the one responsible for this. What matters is the undeniable fact that the Uchiha has been only used by the village, without receiving any benefits from the village whatsoever and has been treated in a way which we cannot tolerate. Never mind that we were one of the main reasons the village exists in the first place, the clan head argued, pounding his hand on the desk's surface. So you want to fight against the village? We're powerful, no doubt, but even I can't help but wonder if we could efficiently win against the rest of the clans combined which have settled down in this village since its founding. I bet there are quite a lot, Madara said. When Fugaku heard this, he scoffed. Don't you think we've already foreseen this and have planned accordingly? We're not the only one discontent with the way this village has been led. The Uchiha won't be the only ones fighting against the village. Madara pondered, so what would be my role in all of this? Because whatever it is, I'm afraid I have to decline. I may have said that I'll always remain loyal to the clan, but this doesn't mean that I will be fighting for it either, at least not for this Uchiha clan. Fugaku's face darkened instantly. Why? Because I barely know either this Uchiha clan or the village. You can't expect me to throw my life away for something which I barely know or understand completely myself. I'm ready to fight to the death for my clan, after all, I'm not a coward. But this is something different. I've just landed in this time so I can't just get myself involved in a conflict as big as this one just like that, Madara attempted to clarify. How had things come to this state of affairs? There was a brief period of silence during which Fugaku thought about Madara's statement. Madara could only hope that the clan head would not change his mind. Madara considered the possibility that he could defeat 3 Uchiha, but that was about it. He was certain that other Uchiha were stationed in various parts of the house. Even though it had been an inadvertent mistake on his part, doing anything else would have been stupidly careless in light of what had happened the last time. Madara went on to say that as the silence grew so long that it was even more awkward to say nothing than it was to consider speaking with the clan head. Besides, I do not really appreciate you using me like some piece in your plan. Fugaku appeared to finally awaken from his reverie at this point. He didn't yell as Madara had thought he would, which was surprising. Actually, quite the opposite. He was giggling. Even though it wasn't totally joyful, it was still laughter. Madara gazed. When Fugaku no longer appeared to be in danger of choking on his own laughter, he finally choked out, "Of course, you're used," further perplexing Madara. "We're ninja. We live to be tools and help other people's plans come to fruition. What about this situation is any different from what it had been before? Surely, the horror stories about the era of the warring clans weren't just some poorly misguided attempt to instill patriotism for this village?" Fugaku responded with continuing laughter. "I know that," gritted Madara's teeth. The word was spat out with as much venom as he could muster, which was quite a bit. "I always knew that while we're easily one of the strongest shinobi clans of the world, we would have also died like flies if we didn't cater to the nobles' whims. I guess this hasn't changed, but still, you're not one of them. You're supposed to be a Uchiha family," he said. Fugaku's expression softened a little as he sobered. "Can you honestly say that you were never used by the clan, never mind your clan status? That you aren't replaceable? That you're truly free to do what you want?" In response to Madara's silence, he continued, "No, I don't think so. You're as easily replaceable as I am. I may be the clan head, but in this coup I might very well die, precisely because I'm the ringleader behind it. Village or not, some things never change. Nowadays, shinobi are used and killed for the sake of their village. We die and fight against the village for the clan. So feel free to be as angry as you want to be about this. It doesn't change the fact that as shinobi, we'll continue to be used and killed for something far greater than us. That wasn't something either Hashirama or you could end with the creation of the village system." After hearing Fugaku's brief speech, Madara took some time to gather himself. "I won't say that I disagree with you, but it doesn't mean that I agree with you either," Madara said at last. He wasn't sure whether Fugaku was being sincere or just attempting to coerce him into doing whatever the clan head wanted him to do for the ostensible benefit of the clan. This did not appear to disturb Fugaku. "I see. I can understand that this is a lot to take in, so it might be prudent for you to just think for a while before coming to a decision. The task I have in mind for you won't succeed, if you do not have the necessary conviction for the cause." Madara crossed his arms in front of his chest and demanded to know, "So what is my task supposed to be, anyway?" He continued in a harsh tone before Fugaku could respond, saying, "And how can you say you're used, if it's you wanting to overthrow the village in the first place? And how the hell can you say that it's for the sake of the clan and then basically say at the same time that it doesn't matter how many Uchiha die in the coup because they're oh so easily replaceable? I may be naive, according to you, but don't think you can fool me, Fugaku. Sama. You're just a big, damn hypocrite," he said angrily, his words accompanied by pure disgust. Madara was unsure of the reasons behind his statement and his sudden decision that it was acceptable to act suicidally. Even though he thought it was complete bullshit, it had annoyed him to just keep quiet and put up with everything. He had been doing that for a while now, following the clan's instructions like the devoted, courageous shinobi he was meant to be, but he hadn't been pleased with this at all. They may be the clan, and he may be completely devoted to them, and he may wish to go back in time without dying first, but he had had enough of this nonsense. Despite losing his mind in the process, he had succeeded in becoming strong and feared. Therefore, if death was the only option available to him instead of a lifetime of being involved in something he didn't truly believe in, then so be it. At least he would have plenty of time to discover the true potential of his Mangekyo Sharingan. Fugaku simply sighed when Madara became enraged and stood up, involuntarily using his Sharingan. Fortunately for both of them, it was just the ordinary ones. As he stood up, he growled, "You haven't listened to a word I've said, Madara," his eyes as red as Madara's. "It's either this or continuing to exist in a village which only shunts and mistrusts and eventually will dispose of us. There's no other future for our clan, and as long as I'm the leader of the Uchiha, I won't sit around, being cowed by the likes of Danzo and watch as my fellow clanmates are being treated like vile scum," he yelled as loudly as before. "And don't you dare assume that the coup is a self. serving attempt on my part to increase my power at the expense of the clan. I didn't initiate the idea of defying the village. Rather, it was Uchiha, whom you may even know, who started what is now the coup d'etat. Even though Uchiha are shinobi by trade, we won't fight and die for something we don't believe in or that will only hurt the clan. It goes against the few values we still possess as Uchiha and shinobi to live in this village the way we do. You must be able to comprehend this. That we will choose the honor of fighting and dying for the clan if we have to choose between living this way, which will only get worse for our kids, or possibly dying. If it hadn't been precisely what he had imagined just moments before Fugaku had gone and begun another of his grand and absurdly lengthy speeches, it wouldn't have affected him as much. Every Uchiha child had been taught to essentially regard those principles and beliefs as sacred. Madara could relate. They defined the Uchiha and were as much a part of them as the Sharingan and their proficiency in Kaden Jutsu. However, the entire clan will be destroyed if this coup fails. I don't believe that such a large-scale act of treason is well received in the village. That will be the end of the clan for which we have all sacrificed our lives. You will have made a pointless sacrifice. Madara argued in a desperate tone. Even the ones you have killed would be nothing but empty sacrifices. The idea of a world without the Uchiha unnerved him like never before. I know this, Fugaku said softly, his eyes dark once more as he glanced over Madara's shoulder at a spot. We all do. Even after years of meticulous preparation, we are aware that we could fail, perish, and be remembered as Konohagakure's curse for as long as it lasts. After all, it is still powerful in spite of its numerous flaws. Even if we fail, though, it might finally wake this village up and let them see a bit of the darkness it has created and we've been living in, he said, laughing harshly. Without the required blood to go along with them, changes have never been significant. He didn't know what the clan had to endure over the past century, or how everything they stood for had been spit on by the very thing they had helped create. It must have made them angry and bitter. Madara wanted to say that this was wrong, to sprout some idealistic nonsense as Hashirama would have done in this situation, but for some reason he struggled to find words. He didn't know, but he could understand the hatred, the bitterness, all those feelings that had previously made him want to burn everything that had caused them in the first place. In their eyes, Konoha would have become the Senju of the time when there were clans and only they. However, the clan's continued existence had never been in jeopardy before, and he didn't particularly like the idea of the village, its peculiar residents, and Naruto being appended and covered in blood. You care for the clan. I can tell that now, so I'm sorry for accusing you of doing this for your own selfish wants, Madara said. But I don't want our clan to die for something as empty as making something which they despise share the pain they have suffered through. It was a new experience for him to preach forgiveness, peace, and such in a way that would have made the Senju idiot proud. And he was also going against the wishes of the clan. He was channeling Hashirama now, but he knew that somehow, it was his, or his other self, fault that things had turned out this way. It was unclear to Madara whether this was an improvement. For a brief moment, Fugaku appeared as elderly as the Hokage himself as he sighed, saying, even though we take pride in our self-control, our pride and emotions could be our undoing. The Sandaime told me that. For an old leader, he can be very blunt sometimes, he said with a grim, bitter smile. He hesitated, lost for a moment in thought, then his eyes averted and he stared at Madara. I wanted you to become a spy and the link that ties this village to our clan, but I can see that even if I give you some time to reflect, it won't alter your decision. But regardless of what you have decided, neither I nor the clan will hurt you, regardless of what you believe I will do. And if you don't trust my word, then at least trust in the fact that being someone from the past, killing you would be very risky and throwing you into a cell would alert village, which we have managed to avoid until now. I only ask of you to remain neutral then and keep what we've said a secret. When the coup occurs and you have still not found your way back to your time, you will be evacuated with the other civilians, children and elders in our clan beforehand. This was beyond Madara's wildest expectations following this stunt. You have my word that I won't do anything which will harm the clan, he said in a hurry. After a moment's hesitation, Madara continued, and if you excuse me, I will leave now. He turned and left quickly without waiting for a response, disregarding the fact that he was being extremely rude by not waiting for the clan leader to dismiss him. He just wanted to be by himself and think. He had absolutely no idea what he was supposed to do at this point. Hashirama enthusiastically stated, Tobirama, that's Izuna. Izuna, that's my younger brother, Tobirama. I'm sure we're going to work great together, oblivious to the way the two boys exchanged scowls. But when neither of them spoke, he made the decision to step in and ask, do you know each other, or what's with those glares? We've already met on the battlefield, Tobirama acknowledged, giving the Uchiha in front of him a suspicious look. I can't believe that I didn't remember when you told me his name. I should have known. Glaring, Hashirama said, it's not going to be a problem, right? His brother sighed and shook his head. I've agreed to work with Uchiha. It doesn't matter who that Uchiha is. I concur, Izuna confirmed sternly. It had taken Hashirama some time to persuade Izuna that, no, they would not attack, and that his brother would not betray them, and that, in fact, he would assist them. Luckily, the Uchiha had only brought a fair amount of kunai and accusations against him before that. Given that he seemed to be very skilled at diplomacy, it's possible that he wouldn't perform all that poorly in his future role as head of the Senju clan. Great, he said with a clap of his hands. So have you figured out a way for us to communicate with each other? Izuna said, yes, I have, and he produced a scroll from his pocket. Tobirama narrowed his eyes and demanded to know, what's that? Izuna clarified, it's the contract to the cat summons, it was a present from Madara. The two Senju brothers asked simultaneously, a present? They found it difficult to believe that Madara would simply give it to his younger brother without the clan's intervention because contract scrolls to summons were extremely uncommon and difficult to acquire. Madara got it on some mission and managed to keep it a secret, Izuna said, idly twirling the scroll before him. He gave it to me on my birthday and told me that I could use it first before he would tell the rest of the clan about it. He wanted to be there when I did it, but he was gone by then. Hashirama inquired, more out of curiosity than anything else, did you forget about it or was there some other reason why you didn't tell me about this earlier? I forgot about it after Madara just disappeared, Izuna acknowledged. Just slipped my mind and by the time I met you, I had already forgotten about this. I found the scroll hidden in one of my bags 2 days ago and I figured that if we both signed the contract, we could use the cat summon as some sort of messenger. Hashirama brightly exclaimed, that's brilliant, and grabbed Izuna by the shoulders. Shortly after, the Uchiha pushed him away, and Tobirama, who had mostly been silent, snorted. Tobirama finally admitted, it would be very useful, indeed, if we could manage to do this, after observing Hashirama slowly stand up once more while massaging his back. In a demanding tone, he questioned, however, are you sure that you won't regret this decision? The scroll belongs to Madara, so I want to give it back to him, Izuna said simply, his dark eyes intense but his tone calm. I see, Tobirama said, sounding both composed and determined. Hashirama's eyes were wide as she watched their conversation. Hold on, that can't be. You've become eternal rivals? The shocked expressions on the faces of the two younger boys were almost the same as the ones Madara had given him when he first said this word. Izuna muttered with a hint of resignation, I don't even want to know, and shook his head. I'm surprised how fast and easily you manage to make people just accept your moronic antics as something which they can't change no matter what they do, Tobirama said. With his shoulders hunched and clouds of gloom hanging over his head, Hashirama uttered, pardon me for my foolish antics. Has he been always like this? Izuna pointed to Hashirama, who was now on his knees, and asked incredulously. Tobirama confirmed, massaging his temple, yes, he said. When the Uchiha finally said, I think that's the first time I've felt genuine pity for a Senju, with a gesture toward the scroll he was still holding, he stated, anyway, we should probably just get this done already. Oh, that's going to be great. I've never seen a summoning before, exclaimed Hashirama, who was once again beaming in joy. As Izuna carefully unfolded the scroll on the ground, the three of them fell silent. The old paper was marked with blood, stained fingerprints and names. When Izuna saw this, he bit his thumb without hesitation and drew blood. After smearing his name clumsily on the paper, he finally touched the page with his bloody thumb. The clean handwriting and distinct fingerprints of the scroll's previous owners stood in stark contrast to the almost careless manner in which it had been completed. Okay, Izuna replied. He hesitated, what now? Hashirama shrugged and turned to face his younger brother. Good question, he said. Any ideas, Tobi? No, however, the Uzumaki clan is going to pay us a visit soon. I'm sure that some of them will know more, Tobirama replied. According to Hashirama, oh, they do? I'm sure Mito-chan can help us, with great enthusiasm. Izuna asked nervously, when will you meet with the Uzumaki then? No idea. Tobirama said to him, I don't know either, I've only heard of it in passing. And I'm not surprised that you didn't hear of this, Hashirama. You rarely spend any time with the other clan members these days. Well, Izuna interrupted him abruptly as he rolled up the scroll once more and put it in his pocket. I see, he said. Then what do you propose are we supposed to do in the meantime? Finding my brother is still our main objective, After all, and we have already wasted enough time as it is. There's not a lot we can do. I suggest the two of you should just try to get something out of the clan heads. Since both of you are the clan heirs now, it shouldn't be too difficult. After all, they are our only lead to Madara's whereabouts right now, Tobirama said. Izuna scowled. This is what Hashirama and I have been doing for a while now, and while there's some progress, it's so slow that it isn't really something we can rely on in regards to finding out where my brother is. I didn't say it was the best solution. It just happens to be our only at the moment. Neither of us has come up with something better yet, so I suggest we should just stick to it and see whether we can find something along the way. You shouldn't complain if you haven't got a better idea either, Tobirama added, unimpressed, as he watched Izuna open his mouth to respond angrily. He grudgingly said, "Fine," and shot the white-haired boy a scorching glance. "Well, if that's everything, I'll return to my clan now. When are we going to meet again?" Tobirama beat Hashirama to the response before he could respond. "We'll most likely be informed about their arrival soon. It will be hard for us to leave the clan grounds then. So I assume that meeting a week later would be the earliest." "No," Izuna scowled and said. "A week is too late. Not only would we waste even more time, I'm also not that sure how long the clan is going to stay here. The people here don't have any more missions to give to us, so it will be only a matter of time before we leave. Now that you mention it, I guess we won't stick around for a long time either," Hashirama replied. "We have to somehow figure out that summoning thing before that," he murmured. "Great." Izuna assured him, "I'll do everything in my power to figure out how to call forth something as quickly as possible. There might be some Uchiha I could ask about it out of pure curiosity." "That's a good idea," Hashirama exclaimed with joy. "Well, good luck to all of us, I guess." HN. The Uchiha turned and headed for the woods without saying anything more. Hashirama scratched the back of his head and scowled. Am I just overthinking it, or is Izuna in a pretty bad mood? He most likely doesn't trust me. I also have the feeling that he can't stand me either, Tobirama said with a grin. Well, I'm not surprised. Continuously trying to kill a person and nearly getting killed by that person tends to do that to a person. There isn't a lot you can do about it either, Hashirama, he said. He rolled his eyes and said, again with that mind. Reading stuff, brother. Whatever, you're eternal rivals. You're bound to have difficulties at the beginning, but trust me, you're going to be the best friends ever, whether you want to or not. Tobirama said, I think that's not your choice to make, and I suppose I have to agree with Izuna on that topic. I really don't want to know how you ever got the notion that we're eternal rivals. See, now you're even starting to agree with each other. It's only a matter of time now, Toby. You're just as bad as the women and girls talking about who gets together with whom. I'm so sorry. I haven't realized how badly this affected you to make a comparison like that. A sigh. Oh. Madara had been aimlessly wandering the clan compound for the past few hours. He had believed that a brief stroll would help him decompress. It was not long before he realized he had been wrong. It only made it worse, if anything. Not a second had passed since he had left, or rather, fled, the house without him wondering what in the world had happened and what he should do next. Sadly, the amount of time he had spent contemplating had not at all assisted him in reaching a firm decision. There wasn't much he could do, really. Most likely, he would simply comply with whatever it was that he was required to do going forward and then find a means to return to his own schedule as soon as possible. It didn't exactly cheer him up to know this. However, he felt a little better after witnessing Sasuke's struggle while attempting to swim a lap in the lake, where he had just arrived. He had the appearance of a drowning puppy. At first glance, Sasuke appeared to be drowning, but in reality, he was. Whoa. After that, he didn't give it much thought. He had enough sense to pour chakra to the bottom of his feet before he ran, but he just ran. In the blink of an eye, he was dragging Sasuke out of the water while doing everything he could to keep him from falling in again while he threw himself around him wildly, hitting Madara more than once. He ran back to the shore as fast as he had before, thinking angrily that the brat had better be thankful for that. When he was back on solid ground, he let Sasuke fall to the ground so he could complete his string of coughs and choking. When Sasuke didn't appear to be about to pass out, Madara yelled, "What the hell were you thinking?" Sasuke muttered, "I was just swimming," without focusing on any one area of the ground. "Swimming," said Madara again. He hesitated a moment. "You must be a total moron to actually mistake what you've done for swimming." "It was swimming, but then I got all tired and that's when I stopped swimming." Madara interrupted drearily, and nearly drowned. "I could tell, obviously, you suck at swimming, so why didn't you have somebody watch over you while you practiced? You know what would have happened if I hadn't happened to be nearby." Sasuke said, I know, with annoyance. It's just that the teacher told us that we're going to do swimming lessons soon and I wanted to be ahead of the class, and since I already knew a bit, I thought I could practice. Madara was unaware that Sasuke had actually returned from the academy by this point, and that it had already gotten so late. And you didn't ask anyone to help you out with this. Why? Well, Shisui and Itachi are gone. My father's busy and... He stopped suddenly, his lips pressed against each other. With an eyebrow raised, Madara questioned, yeah, what about your mother? Sasuke muttered, I knew that you'd be around her, and if I ask her, she'd probably ask you to help me, and I didn't want that, glaring at everything but Madara's face. Madara sneered, and here I am, having just saved your sorry ass. He was truly astounded that Sasuke could have perished for such a ridiculous cause. Sasuke objected, it's not like I wanted to drown. He glared at the aforementioned foolish lake, saying, it's just that stupid lake's fault. You can't possibly blame the lake for your idiotic behavior. I can, and, hey, exclaimed Sasuke upon realizing the insult. He felt Madara's hard gaze on him, and whatever he had wanted to say was interrupted. It was a little rich coming from him because he wasn't exactly known for being level-headed either, but at least he had never almost drowned himself. Sasuke, you could have died and you nearly did. Surely, you're able to realize that you've got only yourself to blame for that. That sort of recklessness can get you killed sometime, and it nearly did today. You're not my parents or Itachi. You can't order me around. Taking Sasuke by the collar, Madara yelled, I can and I will. I'm your brother and I couldn't care less whether you're happy about this or not, you stupid brat. But you shouldn't let your hatred for me cloud your decisions. There won't be someone saving your neck every time. With a sigh, he released Sasuke's shirt. Yes, he most certainly did not want to deal with young children at a time when they were acting more obnoxious than normal. It's not like I hate you, insisted Sasuke. It's... Can you show me how to do this walking thing? What? Madara blinked, a little taken aback by the abrupt shift in subject. I guess you're not as weak as I thought, Sasuke said, grudgingly. And seeing as Ni-san and Shisui aren't there, I guess I could allow you to teach me some cool stuff. Madara scoffingly repeated, allow me? You're so full of yourself, stupid brat. Don't call me a stupid brat. Then stop behaving like one, Madara smirked. I might even consider calling you by your real name then. For a change, it was pleasant to not be the one receiving. Sasuke appeared to accept this, even though his face contorted into a frown. So how does that work? You let some chakra flow to the bottom of your feet and then you have to keep that amount of chakra at a constant level, Madara said. He actually liked that the brat at least knew how to exit the water in case he tried to practice swimming again, even though he could use a little more respect. And he simply knew that the brat was too obstinate and stupid to try it again. You also have to take into consideration that the surface of the water itself is always shifting, so you have to change the flow of the chakra accordingly. And the rest is fairly easy. You just walk. By the time he finished speaking, he had already planted his feet on the lake's surface and was starting to walk slowly and calmly. Sasuke saw this and was about to follow suit when his mind began to catch up. With a look of complete focus, he closed his eyes and placed his fingers in a hand seal to help him channel his chakra. After a half-minute, his eyes opened once more, and he cautiously began to move toward the lake. With one foot tentatively hovering over the water, he came to a stop just in front of the lake. With his arms crossed, Madara questioned, are you going to do it or not? I can't believe that someone as weak-willed as you are could possibly be a Uchiha. That worked. Sasuke snarled and planted one foot on the water, followed by the other. With his arms at his sides, he shot Madara a victorious glance and exclaimed, ha! Who's not a Uchi? Wah. Madara told him, you're hopeless, as he pulled Sasuke out of the water once more. When all he got in return were sputtering coughs, he shook his head. When I was your age, I managed to do it on my first try. Shut up, scowled Sasuke. If he hadn't been drenched, it would have appeared more menacing. You don't have to rub it in my face that I'm weaker than you or Itachi. I already know. He was staring down. Everyone does. What should he have said? Madara, stupid Sasuke. Madara was unsure if he should embrace the blonde brat who was running toward them or strangle him. When the blonde arrived, Sasuke's kicked puppy expression transformed into one that was noticeably more ferocious. What are you doing here? He demanded. That's the Uchiha compound. So what? He asked, turning away from Sasuke to speak to Madara. Where have you been? I thought you'd come to the academy. We wanted to eat ramen, remember? Madara said, we could do that now, with a shrug. As he, too, disregarded Sasuke's objections, he could hardly contain his smile. Cool. You'll love it, Datbeo, Naruto sobbed. Then he grabbed Madara's hand and pulled him away. Come, we have to get to Ichiraku real fast. Snatching Madara's other arm, Sasuke screamed, Oi, you can't just leave with Madara. He promised to teach me water. Walking, and attempted to drag him to his side. Naruto shouted even louder, he doesn't have time for something lame like water. Walking, and he pulled Madara even harder than Sasuke. As expected, Sasuke was now pulling even harder, and Ramen isn't? Naruto had a positively scandalized appearance. Ramen isn't lame, take it back. No, let Madara go. A lake is present. Their corpses would never be discovered there. The boys began to scream even louder, and Madara found himself wondering why he hadn't done it. Madara had just about had enough when it appeared that it would turn into a tug of war with him at the center. After 2 slaps, the 2 brats were lying on the ground, massaging their head. Madara said, Listen, brats, with a profound lack of humor. I'll teach both of you tree walking. I guess that even you could manage this and then we'll go eat ramen, okay? Madara glared at the 2 boys as he activated his Sharingan for good measure, snapping them close as they opened their mouths to respond. With his arms folded, he repeated, okay? Madara let out a sigh as the 2 of them swiftly nodded their heads in agreement. The 2 of them would be more than capable of distracting him from the more concerning things that were about to happen. A masked man scowled as he read a scroll that one of his informants had brought to him in a mist. Hidden village. It seems that a boy named Madara had suddenly materialized in the center of the village and was immediately taken in by Fugaku, the clan leader. He didn't know what was suspicious if this wasn't it. But as the Uchiha Madara the real one, Nagato, whom he had already questioned, had promised him that he had not recently used his fabled Dujutsu to bring anyone back to life. Furthermore, this Madara was only a child if the information he had been given was accurate, and his spies were pretty trustworthy in that respect. Perhaps it was merely a coincidence. However, Madara had informed him that he was expected to bring him back to his best. Why not take it a step further and be resurrected as a child, if that was possible? But why? Was Madara supposed to be unaware of some plan, or did he choose to remain silent about it? It was also suspiciously timed. The Uchiha and the village were already at each other's throats, and the first bloodshed was just a matter of time. What part did this odd child play in this whole situation? His crimson eyes squinted. It appeared that he would visit Konohagakure and speak briefly with a certain Uchiha.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.